Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome to the final conference in the project Roadmap for Implementation of Institutional Assessment, organized by the Ministry of Education and Science of Latvia. My name is Artis Ozoliņš, and I will be your host for today. This project is organized as part of the Erasmus Plus K3 program Support for Policy Reforms, supported by the European Commission. The first part of the conference will be in English with simultaneous interpretation from Latvian to English. So please make sure that's down below in the Zoom window in the menu where there's a globe icon with the word interpretation, you have English turned on for the rest of the conference. Latvia has gone a long way in improving its higher educational system. From accreditation of study programs to accreditation of study fields, and now the evolution to institutional assessment. A lot of work has been done by many passionate and exceptionally knowledgeable people, for which we are all very grateful for. Thank you for that. But what is about to come? Well, in the long run, institutional assessment. But today, for the next hour and a half, we're going to hear about the project, about trends in Europe and the system in Estonia and Lithuania. And after the lunch break at 1 o'clock, we will hear a presentation about the accreditation concept here in Latvia, after which we will sit down with several experts, and we will speak about what we have heard. We're going to talk about the risks, the things that had to be taken notice of when implementing the institutional assessment. And of course, this is the end for the project, but actually this will be the basis, the foundation for the further steps in the institutional assessment in Latvia. How ready are we for this huge change upon us? We will try to find answers to this question and to other questions, and maybe even just form questions for further work. We will do that today here in this final conference. So, dear viewers in the Zoom room, please do send in your questions, both for the presenters and in the second part for the discussion by using the Zoom chat window. You can write either in Latvian or in English. I will try to do my best to translate the questions and give them to the people speaking, of course, if we have time, that is in the context of the presentations. And if there will be any questions here in the audience at the beautiful scientific library at the Riga Technical University, we have microphones for that as well. So please be involved in the conference as much as you like. And of course, thank you to the Riga Technical University for this wonderful opportunity to be here in this scientific library. Let's kick things off. Let's open the conference, and I could not think of a better person to ask to do that from the Ministry of Education and Science. It's Deputy Director of the Department of Higher Education, Science and Innovation, Ms. Dace Jansone. Let's welcome her.
Our agency has been included in this European Register of Agencies, which means that our quality evaluation system for higher education is accepted on the international level. Currently, of course, our priority and the main task of the agency is oriented towards the cycle of accreditation of higher educational institutions. At the same time, we understand that we cannot focus only on what is urgent now. We have also to think about the future, about the next and further steps of development. And it means that how we are gonna make the transition to the cyclic institutional accreditation, what the model for higher education institutions in Latvia will be for this cyclic institutional accreditation, and to prepare for this transition in time, and by paying decent attention to the model of institutional accreditation relevant for Latvia, our ministry in cooperation with the Quality Agency of Latvia applied for this Erasmus Plus project in order to perform in-depth study of international experience of institutional accreditation, to organize discussions with sector experts to get ready and to prepare Latvia for launching this institutional accreditation next stage. I would like to say thank you to our colleagues from Estonian Ministry and Quality Assurance Agency who agreed to be our partners in this project. And this project was supported, and we launched it at the end of 2020. The first thing we did in close cooperation with our Estonian colleagues was studying the Estonian experience. Then during the 2021, we studied step by step another experiences of 5 countries, Sweden, Hungary, Austria, Switzerland, and more. We were making sure that we take a broad look at their systems to study how this cyclic institutional accreditation and how this model has worked and how it is built, both from the point of view of policymakers, what does it mean for regulations in terms of regulations and national laws and regulations and principles that have to be strengthened in these regulations. What does it mean for the accreditation agency, and what does it mean for the higher education institutions? So we discussed at all these countries, these issues with representatives of all 3 spheres and sectors. Of course, we were not speaking only of the strengths. We also discussed the weaknesses and shortcomings they faced in their way towards cyclic accreditation, also mistakes that we could avoid while forming our model in Latvia. There were several things that our colleagues from other countries stressed and emphasized, and to make this transition successful and so that we would be able to reach our goals, we have to be critical. We have to assess the maturity of our system. It means that we have to look at the previous quality assessment procedure if it has exhausted itself. So our accreditation cycle will be completed only 2024. So we have only completed the first stage, the first cycle of this accreditation cycle. So we have to follow the results, and we have to take these results into consideration when we are planning this transitional process. And other colleagues also emphasized that the agency must have appropriate capacity and strength and capacity to provide support. And in these terms, with regard to this effects, the ministry has planned another project to ensure and provide such support for the agency to get ready and prepare for this transition to cyclic institutional accreditation, to provide the necessary support by organizing seminars, workshops for the institutions in this sector. Of course, all of this is related to the further capacity necessary for implementing such approach. Therefore, yes, after studying the experience of these other countries, within this project, we started cooperation with Latvian universities, higher education institutions and colleges. And in this stage, in February and March of this year, we organized workshops where internationally recognized experts introduced us with the models of institutional accreditation. They told us about the international practice, pointed out several indicators that we have to take into consideration when performing assessment. And we also talked very much about that this process is linked with challenges in terms of systems necessary for institutional accreditation. So internal quality systems are of major importance for institutional accreditation. So and with minimum standards and all the systems that we should move towards a development, that we should move towards higher standards in terms of institutions is a very important note. So these international experts gave us a look into this insight into these issues. And then in the mid of March, we once more traveled through these principles with our colleges and universities and higher educational institutions. What do they understand and what principles should be included in the Latvian model according to their opinion, and what risks are that we should be aware of. And then, in line with opinions of the higher educational institutions, we have drafted a model, a principle that we could use when building our system. So today, this is the final conference, final workshop of this project. Therefore, I'm very happy that the experts, both from Estonia and Lithuania, have agreed to participate and share their knowledge that they have agreed to participate. And because we are very happy to always cooperate with our closest neighbors. So again, an insight and the most topical issues with regards to these models, which will benefit our work in the future. And I would like to point out that we are building the new model in cooperation with the sector. In the panel discussion, also representatives of the sector will participate and we'll speak about various aspects related to cyclical institutional accreditation. What does it mean? It means that we have managed to accomplish great work within this project. And although the project is being completed now, our work will continue even further. Therefore, I would like to urge you to be active, to ask your questions, to provide your comments, both today and further on when working with these issues. And now I would like to wish you, to all the participants, fruitful and bright discussions so that we would be able to build one common view of the model we could build in Latvia for the years to come. Thank you and good luck today.
Thank you, Ms. Jansone, for the insights into the project so we could get to know it better. And congratulations also from my side. A lot of work has been done, but a lot of work is in front of us and we will speak about that. And as already mentioned, we would like to turn to our dear neighbors to hear about their experiences, hear some examples from them, because, you know, as they say, words teach, but examples inspire. So let's turn to Lithuania at first with the first presentation today from the Center of Quality Assessment in Higher Education in Lithuania, the head of Institutional Review Department, Ms. Rasa Penkauskiene. Good morning, Rasa.
Good morning. Good morning to all participants. Let me thank you for invitation to participate in your final conference, and especially for the invitation to share our experience in external quality assurance, in particular in institutional review and accreditation. If I may, I will share my presentation.
Yes, please.
Let me know if you can see it
yes,
properly.
we can see it clearly.
Okay, thank you. So let me start from some context on higher education in Lithuania. So as you know, our country is rather small with population less than 3 million. Nevertheless, we have 37 higher education institutions providing approximately 1,600 first and second cycle study programs. And we have about 105,000 of students. It is obvious that participation in higher education is important in Lithuania. We have tradition to study in university or college right after the secondary education. Actually, statistics show that in Lithuania, every fourth has a higher education diploma. Of course, nowadays, this tradition is slightly changing. Young people after graduating the secondary school choose to make 1 or 2 year gap, but still this is more an exception rather than the rule. The network of higher education institutions is rather evenly spread across the country. You can find higher education institutions almost in every region of Lithuania. The biggest cities with the biggest number of higher education institutions, as well as the number of students involved, are in Vilnius, in the capital city, and in other 2 cities, Kaunas and Klaipėda. Also, there are some regional higher education institutions, colleges or branches of universities established in different parts of Lithuania. The number of students in universities and colleges is decreasing, while the number of international students is increasing year by year. Unfortunately, it is not that high that we could say that it is sufficient to cover the loss of native students, or that it is significantly high. As example, latest numbers show that there are about 7% of international students in our higher education institutions. We have binary education system in Lithuania, which means that we have universities and colleges of higher education. The binary system of higher education in Lithuania was introduced in year 2000. I would say that there is almost equal number of both kinds of institutions, but number of students in universities is significantly bigger. We have 18 universities and 19 colleges, but as you can see from the slide, majority, about 70% of students, they study in university sector. More than a half are studying in the first cycle studies, and in master level programs is about 16% of all the student population. In colleges, we have about 1/3 of student population. In Lithuania, we have state and private higher education institutions. 26 out of 37 are state, and the rest are private. If we look at the number of students, majority would be in public sector. In non-state sector, we have only about 10% of all students. Usually, private institutions are very small. Many of them are focusing on studies in social sciences. Colleges also tend to be smaller institutions than universities. And it is obvious why, because the first colleges in Lithuania were established only in year 2000, while first university was established in 16th century. Our agency was established in 1995. So since then, the quality assurance framework is operating in Lithuania. External quality assurance is performed by higher education institutions themselves and internal. And external quality assurance of studies and higher education institutions' performance is done by SKVC. We are obliged to apply the principles of ESG, or standards and guidelines for quality assurance, in the European higher education area, as we are part of European higher education area. External quality assurance of doctoral education in Lithuania is done by Lithuania Research Council. This institution mainly operates towards the authorization to provide doctoral education, evaluation of quality of doctoral education and research, also benchmarking of research. The monitoring of higher education in Lithuania is done by the ministry, by the Government Strategic Analysis Center, and as well by us, by our agency. So as I already mentioned, SKVC is authorized by the Ministry of Education, Science and Sport to organize external review of the activities of higher education institutions. And now we perform the following types of evaluation. First, it would be evaluation of applications to establish new higher education institutions, also institutional review, including the institutional review of higher education institutions in exile. In Lithuania, we have one of this kind. Also, evaluation of study fields and evaluation of the new study programs. External evaluation of study programs on a regular basis was started in 1999. From 2002, we started evaluations with international expert teams, and later on, it was decided to transit from separate study programs to evaluation of study fields. It was done in order to see the systematic view of all studies organized in Lithuania. Since 2020, evaluation of study fields have been started, and all study programs of the same study field are evaluated at the same time in all Lithuanian higher education institutions. We also perform annual study field monitoring and evaluation of medical residency and veterinary studies. It is foreseen that SKVC should perform the evaluation of short cycle studies, but as far for today, we haven't received any of such. Institutional reviews as such, we started in 2011. Before that, in 2000, when the first colleges of higher education were established, there was also the kind of institutional evaluation which was performed after the 4 years of their operation. These institutional reviews were conducted by local experts. And in year 2004 to 2009, totally we evaluated 29 institutions. The aim, as I said, was to evaluate if colleges met expectations raised during the process of their establishment. And here I can see that 93% of results were positive. In 2011-2015, first cycle of full institutional reviews was launched. The aim was to identify strengths and weaknesses in overall functioning of higher education institutions, and of course to offer recommendations for improvement and to accredit, which was really important. As in Lithuania, none of the institution without accreditation can operate, and none of the program also can be provided without accreditation. In 2020, we launched a new cycle of institutional evaluation, and both cycles, all the institutional evaluations are based on a self-evaluation report, which is prepared by higher education institutions. For external evaluation, SKVC assembles international expert teams. National teams perform evaluations only when applications to establish new higher education institutions or new study programs are assessed. All expert teams have student representatives involved without exception. The law on higher education and research in Lithuania allows higher education institutions to choose SKVC or another quality assurance agency that is enlisted in a QAR for evaluations of their study fields or study programs. The study field accreditation decision in Lithuania is taken only by SKVC. In the case of institutional review, SKVC is the only institution authorized by the Ministry of Education, Science and Sports to organize external evaluation activities and also to accredit them. According to the law on higher education and research, all higher education institutions, both private and public, both universities and colleges are subject to regular external evaluation. And the aims of our institutional review are several. One would be to create prerequisites for the improvement of the higher education institutions' activities. Also, we seek to promote its culture of quality, to estimate the basic financing needs with respect to the effectiveness of institutions' activities, and to inform the founders, the academic community, and the general public about the quality of higher education institutions' activities. During the reviews, higher education institutions are presented with a list of recommendations for development of the activities. And the main documents in Lithuania regulating external review are the procedure for external review and accreditation of higher education institutions, which is approved by our ministry, and a methodology for conducting institutional review in higher education approved by the director of the center. As I said before, the history of institutional review starts from year 2000, and the first step was the evaluation of colleges to gain higher education institution status. In 2011, the first cycle of institutional review and accreditation was launched, and it was performed by SKVC with international experts. During this cycle, all higher education institutions were reviewed, 46 in total, and 34 were evaluated positively and received accreditation for 6 years. 12 were accredited for 3 years. It means they got negative evaluation. That led to the repeated institutional reviews carried out in 2016-2017. Throughout the cycle, 3 higher education institutions were given non-accreditation. They were closed or merged with other higher education institutions. And during the cycle, higher education institutions were provided with a solid list of good practices and different recommendations. We had a survey after the first cycle when all partners were included, and results show that institutions positively evaluated the process of institutional review and saw the benefit of self-evaluation and external review results on their activities. In survey after the first cycle, they stated that the largest impact of the review results was made on changes in the area of strategic planning, follow-up monitoring, and also in the area of setting of quantitative and qualitative indicators and improvement of internal quality system. In 2019, we started preparing for the new cycle by drafting the new methodology. The evaluation areas were reviewed and criteria set by the center were renewed. During this cycle, an institutional review, the higher education institution is assessed for quality in the following areas: in management, quality assurance, study and science activities, and also impact on regional and national development. One of the biggest changes was the introduction of review indicators for institutions by the ministry, and now each of the area is supported with a set of indicators. Those indicators also are supported with the review criteria which appear in our methodology. Also, the uniqueness of this review is the assessment by points. A 5-point rating scale appears. I will return to this a little bit later. Also, in this cycle, the evaluation of the activities of higher education institution is initiated by the Minister of Education, Science and Sports. Evaluations are carried out according to an evaluation plan. Assessment and accreditation is performed exclusively by SKVC, and we do this with the help of foreign expert groups. Our procedure was drafted in accordance with the law on higher education and research of the Republic of Lithuania, and for sure, according to the European standards and guidelines for quality assurance in the European higher education area. In the new institutional review cycle, we have adjusted the process itself and also its content after evaluating the experience which was gained during the previous cycle. Another change is in the terms of accreditation. In case of positive evaluation, the higher education institution will be accredited not for 6 years as previously, but for 7 years. So the period of accreditation was prolonged, and 3-year accreditation remains in the event of a negative assessment. During the institutional review, expert panels are also provided with additional information from national registers So together with the self-evaluation report, the center provides the experts with the results of the latest assessments of research and development activities, also provide annual formal evaluation of research and experimental development activities. We provide experts with the results of the evaluation of the ongoing studied fields, conclusions from the previous external review, also some data about the progress, about the numbers of students, teachers, research, and administrative staff. In the new cycle, the higher education institution has a longer period for self-evaluation report preparation. It is now possible to prepare for this in a year instead of 6 months. The self-evaluation report provides data for the last 5 years, so this was not changed. This evaluation cycle also pays more attention to the follow-up activities for which the higher education institution is responsible. We also reviewed the recommendations for higher education institutions on preparation of self-evaluation documents according to the previous experience and published the document online. One more issue to solve was online site visits. In case of an epidemic situation, as we were experiencing, and also with the recommendations from national authorities, the site visit, as well as the panel work before the site visit and the final expert panel meeting were organized via online technologies by SKVC. As I mentioned before, the evaluation areas and indicators have been approved by the Minister of Education, Science and Sports. Both the description and the methodology are regulatory acts. Therefore, the indicators set in them are universal, applicable to a higher education institution of any profile. But I'm not going to go into details here, just an example how it is written in our methodology. The main product of the evaluation process is the evaluation decision and recommendations to higher education institutions submitted in the evaluation report, and the final evaluation report is the basis for accreditation. So based on analysis in the evaluation report, as well as grades given for evaluation area, SKVC makes an accreditation decision of the higher education institution. Each evaluation area must be assessed with one of the 5 grades, where 1 means that there is an unsatisfactory evaluation of area, and that area does not meet the minimum requirements, and there are significant shortcomings. An excellent rating of 5 points indicates that the area is exceptionally good in the national context and international. A score of 1 in at least one area leads to a negative evaluation, which leads to accreditation for 3 years and re-evaluation within the prescribed period. If all areas are scored at least with 2 points, institution is evaluated positively and is accredited for 7 years. And in Lithuania, a non-accreditation is possible after second negative review, which higher education institution can be given. The main stages of institutional review in the new cycle remain the same as we had from the start of institutional review process. We have self-evaluation preparation and submission to the center. Upon receipt of the self-evaluation report, our coordinators review it, assess, also contact higher education institution, and it has the opportunity to correct the submitted documents, to present additional ones if they are missing. Next step would be to form an expert panel and to organize a visit. In each case, the center informs the higher education institution about the composition of the panel. The higher education institution also has the opportunity to make a reasoned proposal to change one or the other member of the intended group. We consider those comments, but I should mention that during the institutional reviews, we had no cases that any member of the panel would be changed. After forming a panel of experts, we have a 3 days visit. During the visit, meetings with target groups and inspection of the infrastructure takes place. Then the draft evaluation report is prepared, which is also forwarded to higher education institution to comment on factual errors. Consideration of the evaluation report in the Higher Education Evaluation Commission also remains in the new cycle. The Commission is advising on the objectivity, on the completeness and validity of the review findings. Following the decision on the evaluation, the higher education institution is accredited for the intended period according to the results of the review. And all the review reports as well as accreditation orders must be publicly available. The last would be follow-up activities. So following the evaluation, the higher education institution carries out follow-up activities which are aimed and improving the activities of higher education institution in accordance with the recommendations they were given.
3 minutes left.
Yes, so this is my last slide. I just wanted to share some results from ongoing institutional reviews. Although our current institutional review started only last year, but we have some results to share. So 11 reviews were performed, 9 of them are positive and 2 negative. As you see from results, none of the areas in the higher education institutions was evaluated as excellent. And most institutions still experience difficulties in management area. So this would be shortly. Last but not least, I would like to share a few lessons which we learned already in the new cycle. It is maybe earlier to make big conclusions, but still what we see is that institutions tend to produce more descriptive rather than analytical self-evaluation reports. That means that we still have to elaborate on that, especially when working with higher education institutions. Also, the issue is with online site visits. Our experts claim that physical procedures are better suited for gathering evidence from institutions and also from the point of view of interaction in the panel and the general satisfaction regarding the entire quality assurance procedure. We had lots of discussions whether we should return to the site visits or should we remain them online. Because on the one hand, the goal is to provide in-depth, comprehensive recommendations to higher education institutions to see what is not in the documents and what can only become apparent by seeing and interacting with live people. And on the other hand, providing a level playing field for all higher education institutions. This is an issue. In example, if some higher education institutions are evaluated remotely and the others are not. But from this, in our beliefs, the quality of the findings would suffer and the assessment could be more formal and superficial. So after the experiencing, as we say, the issue with quality of the process versus equality, we still took the decision to return to site visits to higher education institutions. So from this spring, we are taking our experts back and we don't have Zoom visits, at least for now. That would be all from me. I hope I managed to do it right in the time.
Yes, yes, thank you. Perfectly right on time. And if we can, there's actually two questions, but I'm gonna ask one of them to save time, and maybe you can afterwards answer the second one in the Zoom chat. Let's use the opportunities that are given. But maybe the question that I would like to ask, and it is from Jānis Bernāts. The question is about the periods. In Lithuania, you do the assessment for 7 and 3 years. In Latvia, 6 and 2. Has this division, these periods, 7 and 3, have they proved themselves in reality? Are these terms okay for you?
I would say that not yet, because we just started this period. We just prolonged it. So the results will come, I guess, after 7 years. In Lithuania, we see with those periods the opportunity to show trust in higher education institutions and their provision, and also as it is the second cycle. So we have some experience in higher education activities which are performed by higher education institutions, and we see the progress. And now we are starting discussions about the third cycle. So there are some proposals that this period could be even prolonged more, and it could be 10 years. But this is still only just the idea.
A work in progress. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Rasa Penkauskiene from the Center for Quality Assessment in Lithuania. Thank you for taking your time and joining us in this conference and sharing some valuable insights that I'm sure our colleagues here will take into consideration, build upon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, now let's hop onto an imaginary plane and fly over to Estonia. Two presentations from Estonia. And first up, joining us from the Ministry of Education and Research of the Republic of Estonia, representing the Higher Education, Vocational Education and Training Policy and Lifelong Learning Department. It's Acting Head of Higher Education Policy, Ms. Kristi Raudmäe. Hello. We can't hear you right now. Maybe your microphone is turned off. Let's check that. On the bottom left-hand side, there should be a microphone sign.
I hope, can you hear me right now?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Now?
Don't worry, take your time.
And I try to share my screen also with my presentation. And I hope you see the which view.
Yes.
Can you see now the presenter?
Something is happening. We're getting a connection. Very good. Wait just a little bit. It's still connecting. Because right now we see that you have started to share your screen, but we can't see it yet. Yes, there it is. Beautiful. What a beautiful building.
And only the building or also the comments of the presenter?
No comments, just beautiful building. So okay. Please carry on.
Then it's right. Okay, thank you very much. So hello, everybody. It is nice to be here, and it has been very interesting sharing our experience with our Latvian colleagues. And as we have two presentations from Estonia, so from the ministry part, I will I will give you an overview about our higher education and quality assurance system, maybe more briefly than our quality agency later. And as our Lithuanian colleagues started with a brief overview about the size of our system, in Estonia, the number of higher education students in our system is about 45,000 students each academic year. And more than 80% of those students are studying without tuition fees. There are more than 10% of foreign students in our system, about 5,000 students each academic year. When we look at our higher education system from institutions part, We also have binary system where universities, public universities have more than 70% of our students. The private sector is quite small, less than 10% of students studying there, and also professional higher education institutions form quite a small part of our system. Our two largest universities, Tartu University and Tallinn Technical University, they have more than 50% of Estonian higher education students. When we look at our binary system, then we have 6 public universities that provide higher education on all 3 levels. State professional higher education institutions operate on bachelor professional higher education level, but also providing master education programs if they have granted the right for that. And our private education sector consists of 4 very small private institutions and 1 private university. When we talk about our higher education quality assurance system, then of course, when we look from the historical point of view, this external accreditation in Estonia started at the end of 1990s, when accreditation was mandatory to issue nationally recognized diplomas. And the procedures of accreditations were quite similar as today: full accreditation for 7 years, conditional for a shorter period of time. But the current system started to operate from 2009, where after that, the main responsibility of accreditation and assessment was given to Estonian Higher Education Quality Agency. And also institutional accreditation now is mandatory at least once in every 7 years. And smaller changes are still happening even recent years, as from 2020, we no longer assess the study programs in study program groups, and we have switched to thematic reviews instead of that. Looking at the current quality assurance system as a whole, then we see that there are several activities, procedures that should guarantee the quality culture in our institutions. And they can consider it as quite different approaches, but they still form this total overview of the system for different aspects. So on the first pillar, I describe the right to organize studies, which is which gives the higher education institution the right to operate in Estonia. It is applied when a new institution wants to be founded in Estonia, but also when existing institution starts teaching in a new study program group. This the part of quality assessment is still evaluated by our quality agency, but the right to organize study is granted by ministerial decree. The second pillar of the system is institutional accreditation, which will be described later by our agency. And it is also possible that it is ordered by a foreign agency, but usually it is our Estonian quality agency that carries these procedures for our institutions. As a background to these main procedures for higher education institution, we could describe these complemented aspects written here on the fourth pillar as thematic quality assessment, OSCA system, administrative contracts. These instruments also support the quality culture in institutions and guarantee that several aspects are considered when looking how our institution operate. Thematic quality assessment was introduced quite lately, and not many, only one of these kind of assessments are carried out currently. OSCA system is the labor market and skills analysis, and they consist both of quantitative analysis of graduates and sectoral needs, but also collect information and provide suggestions regarding skills and qualifications that are necessary to improve study programs. These suggestions are also with administrative contracts, they are made compulsory for the higher education institutions to follow. The next important part of the system is administrative contracts that are 3-year contracts with public universities, where basic obligations, both quality, effectiveness, are agreed with higher education institutions. And fulfillment of these goals are monitored every 3 years. Performance funding could also be mentioned as part of the system, as following also quality indicators, effectiveness indicators, also influences the activities of higher education institutions. And of course, finally, there is administrative or state supervision that is carried out when specific problems are identified in our higher education institutions, and can end with ministerial percepts or penalties. The third pillar here on the slide is research and development evaluation, that in our system, as I understood, similar to the Lithuanian system, is carried out a little bit separately from higher education, as this is carried out by Estonian Research Agency. Also, research evaluation consists of 2 parts. There is this regular evaluation, where the corresponding fields of R&D are evaluated, and passing this evaluation gives access to research and development funding instruments, but also gives access to doctoral studies. And targeted evaluation is similar to thematic evaluations in higher education, where specific fields or subjects are taken under considerations for suggestions to develop the research policy. Why are they kept separately is one of the reasons is that the institutions that are kept in mind for those evaluations are different. As we can see, the positively evaluated R&D institutions in Estonia, they include our public universities, also our private university, and all the other institutions are specific research and development institutions without higher education activities. What we also see here is that our professional higher education institutions have not passed research and development evaluation. One of them has applied for it, but was not able to pass it. But in the future, most likely they are gonna continue with their R&D plans, as we have understand from our institutions. To conclude with the role of different quality procedures in our system, I have mentioned here on the slide several thoughts and deliberations on that because some of them can be considered as benefits of our system, but also several aspects are always under discussion in which direction we should develop or put more attention to. With the system I have described, we have pursued both parts, regular and ad hoc assessments should be possible because they serve different purposes, as these results can give either specific rights or work as suggestions to improve the system without any penalties. Also, a very important components of assessment are the both qualitative and quantitative parts of the evaluations. Also, we have developed our system from a program-specific approach to more institutional approach, as the internal quality assurance mechanism should guarantee the program-specific quality of higher education. And it is really important that both views, both external view and self-evaluation form part in the assessment. There are still ongoing discussions about evaluation of research and development together with assessment of higher education, as our institutions quite often see the separate procedures as a burden to the system. But this is the question, how profoundly can research and development be reviewed within the institutional accreditation? And as a final point here, also there are ongoing discussions regarding the role of assessment or evaluation as giving right or possible penalties versus analytical review with suggestions to improve the quality culture. So this is a quick overview of how our higher education quality assurance system can be viewed by the state. Okay.
All right, thank you. I understand that is the last slide, right?
Yes, this was the last slide.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation and for this wonderful last slide, which I think will serve us well in the discussion at the end of the day. So thank you very much for your presentation, ladies and gentlemen. Miss Kristi Raudmäe, thank you for participating, and let's turn to your colleagues, right? Let's turn to other experts from Estonia with the next presentation, which will be served actually by 3 experts. First, in my experience, let's see how this goes. So from the Quality Agency for Higher and Vocational Education in Estonia, first of all, it's Assessment Coordinator, Ms. Tia Bach. Then next up, Assessment Director, Ms. Leah Lowry. And last but certainly not least, it's the Director of the agency, Ms. Heli Mattison. Welcome, ladies.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation on behalf of our team. We really decided to join this event with a team from ECHA because we are happy always. We have always been happy and will be happy to share our experiences on external quality assurance with our neighborist countries and our colleagues there. Hello everybody in ICA and hello everybody in Iskavisi who are here, and we are really happy to join the event. As Christy from the Ministry of Education and Research said, that we will try to go in more details and talk more about institutional accreditation in Estonia. And we also decided that we will focus more on challenges even. So I think it will be beneficial for the colleagues in Latvia while we're developing further the concept of institutional accreditation in Lithuania. Maybe first a few words from me about ECHA, which is a quality agency for higher and vocational education. We started with vocational education parallel to the higher education already in 2010. And as a matter of fact, we are widening our activities continuously. So in 2022, actually, we can talk about higher education, vocational education and training, but also continuing education and general education even. So the agency is exploring new areas of activity. And you can see here our logo, which is very good logo for all educational areas, because it says that the most important part of each educational system is the learner. And actually the birds you see on the bottom of the tree are the learners who have got a change in quality and are able to fly. So our main aim is to assure, in cooperation with educational institution, really the quality of education and increase the value, added value the learner will get from the system. We can switch to the next slide, and let's really start focusing on institutional accreditation, which is actually the only external quality assurance procedure regularly conducted in Estonia. No program accreditations anymore. Just as Christy explained, the institution which wants to start offering studies in a new study program group should get the right. But this right will be usually at the end. This right will have no terms at all. And the only regular accreditation is the institutional accreditation in Estonia. And this means that this is very crucial for the whole system, that this the only external quality assurance procedure will really give us enough information to have trust in our higher education institutions. The main purpose of the institutional accreditation is to support the development of strategic management and quality culture that values learning-centeredness, creativity, and innovation in the higher education institution, as well as to increase the societal impact of education, research, and development delivered by the higher education institutions. As you see, very complex purpose. And we are looking for compliance to the standards. So we have developed in cooperation with all stakeholders, but it is much more than just compliance with standards. We are looking for in the framework of institutional accreditation. Maybe one more fact has to be highlighted. When we started as an agency in 2009, there were actually 34 institutions offering higher education in Estonia. 34. At the moment, there are 18 institutions offering higher education in Estonia. It means that there has been a very big, change in quality, which can be shown in numbers, in the quantity, of higher education institutions. But it also means that we really are in the phase of development where we can trust those institutions who are left in our higher education system. And this is also maybe the reason we can just have one type of external quality assurance in Estonia. When we look at the module, there is a nice picture we have developed to show the model of institutional accreditation. As you see, in the heart of our institutional accreditation are the three main pillars of each higher education institutions. This is research and development, learning and teaching, and service to society. Those areas form the heart of the institutional accreditation as well. But each institution needs a kind of framework and structure, which is given by strategic management and the resources. And there are three more important aspects or topics which were actually main development or improvement areas based on the previous institutional accreditations in Estonia. They are so-called topics which go through all standards and all other areas. Those are quality culture, which is important both for research and development, learning and teaching, as well as service to society, but also the same with internationalization and academic ethics. So, and this is the only external quality assurance procedure focusing on assessing the learning and teaching as one of the main pillars or one of the main areas of higher education. We are really focusing on this specific pillar in our procedure. And this means that that we have divided the learning and teaching into 5 different standards, like study program, teaching staff, learning and teaching, assessment of students, and learning and support system. And as we don't have any opportunity more to assess the study programs, but it's still important to find out during the institutional accreditation whether the rules and requirements the institution has set on the university, at the university level, whether they are really implemented on the bottom level in the study program level. So we take a sample of study programs and we assess also the quality of study programs. And how do we choose those programs? Because the institutions are very different. There is a small institution in Estonia, a private institution with 60 students only, and there is a big university of Tartu. So according to our rules, we choose up to 10 study programs from different study areas. There should be always all higher education cycle. The whole higher education cycle should be represented, bachelor, master, and PhD. And also all languages. You can imagine that there are Estonian and English language, no more languages actually. But we always pick at least one example in one program taught in English language also. But also we will take into account the fields of responsibilities of higher education institutions. So what are the most important areas of responsibilities, but also the previous assessment results. It means that we are looking at the previous assessments and pick up some programs which had more problems during the previous assessments. But all this is carried out in cooperation with higher education institutions. So we are proposing some programs with our arguments, and the higher education institution can add or we can discuss whether this sample is the most appropriate one to cover the whole area of activities of the higher education institutions. This has been a very interesting process. to negotiate on or to argue which programs should be taken on board and which not. And actually the institution respects it very nicely when we are picking up problems. They actually are having objectively more problems with as those who have a high quality. So, and if we go one slide further, then here are the 12 standards of our institutional accreditation. And those are not the logical assessment areas the institutional accreditation usually has. So we go more in details, and as you see marked in orange are those standards connected directly with the teaching and learning area. Our standards, you can see them on our website very clearly, and it's no need, I think, to explain them here. But our standards are quite scarce. They usually have 1 or 2 sentences, and those where each word is very important, yeah. And those standards are mandatory for higher education institutions to comply with. At the same time, which is even more important, we do have so-called improvement-led guidelines. We are showing some examples on one side, how to show that the institution is meeting the standard. But the other side, we are also trying to show some good practices which could be done furthermore, not just complying with the standard. So they are not mandatory, the guidelines, they are like possibilities, not just how to comply with the standard, but also how to improve the institution in connection with this standard. For example, we had amended our guidelines quite recently with some ideas how to improve the quality of digital education. So it's not a part of standard because digital education, e-courses is not mandatory in our system, but still we decided together with our stakeholders again that there are some good ideas how to improve the institutions in the area of digital learning, and they were added as part of guidelines. We also do have some, each standard has indicators. Some of them are compulsory, and actually only one standard doesn't have compulsory indicators. And this is the research and development standard because of the diversity of institutions we are having in Estonia, and like big public universities, research universities, they may have different standards than the institutions of applied sciences, and that's why we don't have any compulsory indicators here. But we are expecting actually that the institutions are having more indicators to show the compliance with the standard, because one of the main ideas of changing from the old system to the new one is having trust on the internal quality assurance system the institutions are having themselves. So, and they have a big variety of different indicators they are using to show themselves, not to us, but to show themselves the improvements in certain areas. And the last slide from me would show the results of from institutional accreditation. We have had since 2019. We are having the new system without any program accreditation or assessment of study program groups in Estonia. You see marked in white the universities who have passed the institutional accreditation, and orange are the institution of professional higher education institutions in Estonia. And green means that the institution is compliant with all standards, and the yellow one is showing that in some cases the institution is having some problems with the compliance, and they have got partial compliance with the standard. And the last mark is about worthy of recognition. In our system, there is a possibility that the assessment panels can appreciate and can give the mark of worthy of recognition for those institutions in specific standards where they really have shown excellent results compared to international level of development. So having said that, as I said, we would like to share with you some challenges we are facing, and actually to mention that we are preparing the new strategic plan for our agency for the next period. Tomorrow we will send our self-evaluation report to ENQA. And with this connection, we have conducted a we have had a very intense work of self-reflection during last months, and the SWOT analysis is showing that one of the biggest weaknesses we think we are having, or let's say not we, but the higher education quality assurance system in Estonia is still having, despite all the developments we are having, that the quality of our assessment reports vary too much. So we are not happy with all quality assessment reports, including the reports on institutional accreditation. And it means that we are still thinking whether we are doing enough to assure that all assessment reports prepared by our experts in cooperation with our coordinators and supported by ECHA, supported by all the trainings. What are the aspects we have still missed, and what could be done furthermore to assure the quality? So now I am passing further to my colleagues, Leah and Tia, who will explain you more in details about our challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Heli. So my name is Leah Lauri, and I'm very happy here today to share some of our challenges that we have been facing during the implementation of this new cycle of institutional accreditation, some lessons that we have learned thus far. So one of the challenges that Heli already mentioned is the quality of the assessment reports. And it is kind of important to us because when there are international expert panels where every expert comes with their own background, national system, and when we try to teach them about the Estonian system of higher education and research and financing of higher education, so it takes some time and some effort from our side. And there have been more than 100 experts, 113 experts from 20 countries so far. So what we have seen that is very important to give very clear guidelines to these experts. We have developed a template with guidelines, and every expert panel together discusses the assessment of all these 12 standards. And they have to assess whether these standards are conforming to requirements, partially conforming to requirements, or do not conform to requirements. And of course, there is possibility to outline some good practices with a worthy of recognition mark. So what we expect the panel to do is to provide an analysis of the evidences that they have gathered. And perhaps one thing to mention here is that we have made very clear distinction between areas of improvement and recommendations in the assessment report and the opportunities for further development. So these areas for improvement, they are clearly shortcomings related to the fulfillment of the standard. So this will be the must for higher education institution to put effort in the future. And opportunities for further development, these are these enhancement-led suggestions for higher education institutions, what they might want to consider when developing one or the other area in their institutions. Yes, the accreditation model is, we probably can skip it here because it's quite traditional. We haven't found anything really new that we can implement here. It starts with the training, self-assessment training for the higher education institution, at least 1 year before the accreditation visit. And it kind of ends with a follow-up seminar that we have with the higher education institution after the institutional accreditation decision has been made by the Higher Education Council of ours. And of course, during these last 2 years, most of these activities have been done remotely. So comparing with the previous cycle of institutional accreditation, we really have to say that these systems seems to be more demanding, both for the higher education institutions, for us as an agency, and also for the experts, as the 12 standards together with the sample of study programs have to be assessed, and the consistent report has to be written, bringing out the strengths as well as the opportunities for further improvement and areas for improvement. So, but on the other hand, of course, the good thing is that this new system with 12 standards, it enables closer focus to specific topics like academic ethics or assessment of students or quality culture that we saw where the shortcomings were based on the outcomes of the previous institutional accreditation cycle. And there are perhaps 2 questions that we ask from ourselves constantly. The first is how to ensure the comparability of accreditation results with international panels. Just this is important for the system level, and for the higher education institutions, of course, it's most important how to give meaningful recommendations to higher education institutions. And we have indicated some critical or key success factors. First of all, this is the self-assessment training for higher education institutions that we hold at least a year before the accreditation visit. The selection of experts is essential, and of course the training of experts, how to come to the common understanding of the Estonian system and also the understanding of standards. And there is a clear and bigger role of the accreditation coordinators. So very briefly to tell about the cooperation with higher education institutions. When we come together for the self-assessment training, it is very good opportunity to build a common ground for further cooperation. We have built very clear guidelines with reflective questions for higher education institutions. We share the good practice, not only about the writing of self-assessment report, but also about how to conduct the process more effectively. And we see, yes, that the quality of these reports vary. And it is our task to consult at certain level this writing, but of course we can't provide a consultancy for higher education institutions. And what we have seen, if the self-assessment report is in a not very good quality, the site visit and the additional materials that will be asked by the expert panel becomes very extensive. So that we would like to avoid. And some words about the training of experts. What we have seen during this forced remote period of our work, that this is actually the very good opportunity to bring the expert panels together already months before the accreditation visit. We started to have at least 3 sessions with the expert panels, and there is more possibilities actually to provide them with the knowledge of Estonian higher education systems, to build a common understanding about the standards, etc. So this is probably something that we are going to continue in the future as well, to start communication with experts remotely already a couple of months before the visit. And I will hand over to Tiia.
Yes, thank you very much to my colleagues for this for the presentation so far. And I can see that I have actually less than 1 minute just to wrap up and say a few words about the role and importance of the coordinators in the whole review process, because we should not underestimate the role of coordinators. And one of the changes that we have made in this kind of review is that we have 2 coordinators for each of institutional review processes. And this has been a really necessary change or improvement because it's a really extensive process, and the workload of coordinators is really much bigger than it used to be. So it gives the opportunity for the coordinators to share some of the tasks. And I'm not going to go through the points that you see on the slides, and you will have the slides anyway. But just to say in a few sentences that indeed the coordinators have many different tasks, starting from conducting the seminar for the higher education institution and ending with organizing the follow-up seminar with the institution after the whole process. But I would just like to mention a few points that probably are really important, perhaps most important, and also challenging for the coordinators. And these have already been mentioned, that how to select, first of all, very competent and professional experts for our panels. As was mentioned before, the size of the panels can be very different depending on the size of the institution. We may have 5 experts versus 13 international experts in the panel. So it may be a challenge to make sure, or how to ensure that we have a good balance between the experts with different competencies, as they need to also review the study programs and then give feedback on the programs. So composing the panel is a very important task of the coordinators, preparing the panel for the site visit, and even meeting with the chairs and secretary separately in order to explain what we expect from the panel, what we expect from the chair, and also the secretary, who is mostly responsible in the end for the report writing. The training of the panel was already mentioned. And of course, during the visit, the coordinators need to make sure that everything runs smoothly. But most importantly, after the visit, it's really one of the main tasks of the coordinators to guide the panel to write a good quality report. and this is really which is the outcome of the whole review process. And we can see that, that this is one of the most challenging tasks sometimes for us as staff of ECHA to really advise the panel how to write an analytical report, as was also mentioned from our colleagues in Lithuania, that we can see that, or we try to guide the institutions how to write analytical reports. At the same time, we are also guiding the panels to write analytical reports that are based on evidences, and the report should really be beneficial for the institution in the end. So this kind of guidance and checking the initial report and giving feedback on the report is the main task of the coordinator after the visit. So I'm going to wrap up here, and I hope you got some ideas and some overview of the institutional review process in Estonia, and you are welcome to ask any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Tia, Leah, and Heli, for the wonderful presentation. I think we are all here in the audience wrote down many valuable points that we'll probably discuss in the discussion at the end of the event. I see that no questions have come in. That just means that was an excellent presentation. Everything was clear. Kudos to you. Thank you for participating. Thank you for taking your time and informing us about the system in Estonia. And right now, dear viewers, we're going to take a lunch break. We're going to return at 1 o'clock when we will learn more about the institutional assessment concept for Latvia. We heard about Lithuania, about Estonia. Now we're going to hear about the concept here in Latvia, and we will later on discuss it with an expert panel. So see you soon and bon appetit. Labdien, dāmas un kungi! Laipni lūdzam atpakaļ. Ceru, ka pusdienu pauze bija pietiekama.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope the lunch break was long enough so that you could go to your kitchen or the nearest cafe to have some coffee or some refreshments, and you are ready for our valuable second part of today's conference, a roadmap for implementation of institutional assessment implemented by the Ministry of Education Science of the Republic of Latvia. The second part will be run in Latvian with simultaneous interpretation into English.
Science of Latvia. This part will be in Latvian. So please just double check, make sure that in the interpretation menu that is on the bottom of the Zoom window, there's a globe icon. Just check that your language channel is set to English so that you hear everything in English. Enjoy. Esam dzirdējuši gan par tendencēm, gan par sistēmu Lietuvā un
We have listened to systems and trends in our neighbor countries, Lithuania and Estonia. Now it is time to pay attention to Latvia. And the head of Higher Education Quality Agency, AICA, Jolanta Silniece, will tell us about that. Hello to everyone. Hello to all participants joining us on Zoom. I wanted to say thank you to our colleagues from Estonia and Lithuania that they share their experience, and we have a tradition to discuss various issues and questions. And I wanted to say thank you to all higher education institutions and our partners about, to my opinion, our successful cooperation, because the concept we are going to present to you today is our joint work, the result of our joint work that will be elaborated even more in the future. And I remember that in 2014, we were discussing and speaking about what will be the quality insurance agency, what kind of institution that would be and what would happen next. But now we are suddenly 2022 and we are again speaking of changes. And I hope that also these changes will be marked positively. And today I will present the concept of institutional accreditation in Latvia. And I will also slightly touch upon the system as we have it now and why we need these changes. We will look into the strengths and weaknesses of the current system. And we will also speak about the process that we are heading to and how are we gonna implement this institutional accreditation. Looking back at our current quality assurance system and quality assessment system, we see that there are 5 types of quality assessment. We also know that part of them overlap and not always these goals are clear enough. And some of these procedures are regular. Some of them have more clearer goals. For example, for new study programs, when you have the right to launch a study program, the regular process we has assessment and accreditation of study programs. We are all working on that currently. Then we have a new type of assessment. So this is including a licensed study program into the study direction accreditation sheet. And we will see the results of this in the future. And also assessment of the most important changes to accredited study directions. This is undertaken by colleges. Mainly, sometimes these are technical amendments and changes, sometimes experts are involved, and also accreditation of higher education institutions, colleges, which is also defined in regulatory enactments, but and this is done once for a new college, and that's it. And looking back at the current system, we have identified some strengths and some weaknesses in the process of our dialogue with higher education institutions and colleges, because we have had several seminars and workshops where we had the opportunity to discuss quality assessment issues and the system and how we organize these processes. We recognize such strengths as common process management, independence and transparency of quality assessment. We always have assessment coordinators participating, and also the role of coordinators was emphasized by our colleagues from Lithuania and Estonia. We also have methodologies and guidelines for each assessment procedure, and we also discussed with stakeholders these procedures. We have also organized informative workshops in this regard. And we also try to select the assessment experts so that they would match the profile of the studies, the study program. And we, of course, also provide training for these experts. And the weaknesses or some drawbacks are enormous. Bureaucracy and regulatory burden on higher education institutions, on colleges, on us as the agency, on the experts who have to familiarize themselves with a big number of documents, which makes them consume much of their valuable time for studying documents. Also, the expenses and also the usefulness of assessment procedures, because as I mentioned, there are many types of assessment procedures and each of them has their value added. Sometimes it is bigger, sometimes not so big. And as we have discussed with all higher education institutions and colleges, also representatives of these institutions have provided the following comment that it is worth heading towards the progress and autonomy, to reduce the administrative burden. And as we head towards a new assessment cycle, we need a preparatory transitional period. The current 2-year accreditation term is too little. Experts should not evaluate the compliance with regulatory enactments, and the accreditation should bring value added to all institutions. And this must be not an external requirement, but an internal necessity, which means that institutions should be aware why this is necessary, and they should be able to perform critical self-evaluation. And based on all the comments we received, we also looked at the current study direction, assessment and accreditation process, which has been started in 2020 and which will complete in 2024. So we are halfway with all our activities. And now the second group of study directions will complete. We are going to start working with the third group, but despite the process is still going on, we can now see the advantages and benefits of this process. The first thing is that we can see all the study programs in Latvia. We have checked in detail the compliance of study programs with external regulations. We have identified the fields that we would like to improve even more, or the fields where more attention should be paid to. And all study directions and the relevant study programs have been assessed by common standards, so the results are comparable. Another benefits are that we have identified and established that higher education institutions and colleges have had additional stimulus to revise and update their internal processes, to evaluate the sustainability of their programs and the topicality of their programs, because many programs were closed and higher education institutions and colleges submitted these programs for closure themselves. As the international availability improves, also the English versions of sections or whole web pages of institutions were improved so that richer information was made available in foreign languages about the offer of these institutions. And of course, evaluation was also performed by our external independent group of experts, and they evaluated both study directions and study programs and gave their recommendations. And as we see, these recommendations help higher education institutions and colleges to identify the areas where more attention should be paid to, where some improvements are necessary. And having assessed all the comments, all the opinions, we have also within our agency held a discussion about the necessary changes and what should be taken into account. And as we were working on the model of institutional accreditation, we have stuck to these principles. First, that assessment and evaluation must comply with a certain goal. We have to balance the principles of compliance and quality. So this model has also been discussed with all stakeholders. And we think that this will promote and ease our transition to new institutional accreditation model. It will also improve the quality culture at the institution. And we are going to build consequent and understandable evaluation and assessment procedures so as to ease the administrative burden, so that the results will be also trustworthy, and these results will be made publicly available. And this, of course, will promote the autonomy and responsibility of higher educational institutions, because no autonomy can be possible without responsibility. And when we were working on the goal, there were several variants, and we have heard the experience of several foreign agencies. And we have familiarized ourselves with their systems. And so we defined our goal, that the goal of accreditation of higher education institutions and colleges is to support the improvement of internal quality as insurance systems, and to promote continuous improvement of the operation and activities of these institutions. And this is, of course, the initial draft. And when we will meet all the stakeholders again, we are going to probably update this goal and to define it even more, detail it even more. And the current fields and areas that are defined for the university and college accreditation, we have put forward the following fields, and the fields that could be evaluated are management and support systems, resources, cooperation and internal relation, ensuring of the study process, and scientific research or artistic creativity, artistic and creative work. Of course, the central element is the quality assurance system, and we also expect that we will have a separate evaluation of study programs, a sample of study programs, and all these areas. And as we are working for an approach for each institution, we will definitely take into consideration the strategic directions of universities and colleges, the type and goals defined by the institution itself, as well as the monitoring systems and data, and also the international relation of the scientific institutions. This will be taken into account when evaluating the scientific universities. So every type of institution, as we know, there are many higher education institutions in Latvia, and there are many types of them. So we will have to develop adjustable fields measure for each of those types of institutions. And as we are assessing an institution, the experts and institutions, when they are getting ready and while they are performing self-evaluation, they should ask the following questions to themselves and answer these questions. Of course, what is that the institution wants to reach? What are their goals and tasks? And whether they comply with the needs of the sector or the state, and what has the university or college done to achieve what they have planned, and what is the results, and what are their future plans. And we also expect that there should be a documentary evidence for each of those steps, and where necessary, of course, because expert interviews are planned with all the stakeholders, of course, but it is also important so that stakeholders would use a single common approach and would, so that they would be informed about the documents that exist. We have also thought about how the accreditation process could look like. And as the study direction assessment, which is performed currently, we think that it would be valuable to conclude a contract regarding institutional accreditation and assessment with each higher educational institution. And perhaps we could provide for that the university or college could choose any of the agencies registered in the EQAR register, but maybe not for the initial accreditation. And we are thinking that we could, as the agency, we could perform the first compliance assessment, and then the experts would work with the self-evaluation report and would provide their quality assessment. And then this process would be separated from the evaluation and the decision taking, and then the decision making process could take up to 5 months. And in all cases, the decision, irrespective of which agency performed the evaluation, the decision would be taken by the Study Accreditation Commission. And here we see in more detail what we spoke about, because this compliance assessment would be in the components of the agency, and then we would also provide to colleges feedback regarding what we have concluded in the compliance report, and the quality assessment, which would be performed by the quality experts, would be performed according to the principles as they are now, where we are working with study directions. But we would include another one more item, the second visit of experts, and looking back at our practice and work with remote or semi-remote visits at institutions. This second visit could be used to clarify additional questions they may have after reviewing the documents, and this would be their opportunity to ask some questions and to clarify some ambiguities. And the experts could also prepare the final report that would be then forwarded to higher educational institutions or colleges. This is the process as we plan it to be. And as a result, looking back and looking at the current system and the experience we all have, we think that the accreditation terms might be 3 or 7 years, or a refusal to provide accreditation, to secure accreditation. So the right to issue a state-recognized diploma would be awarded. And as a result of the institutional accreditation, higher education institutions and colleges would have access to our conclusions regarding their compliance with regulatory framework, also recommendations of assessment expert group that they could use in their further work. And in the result, we all believe and hope that the quality of our universities and colleges would be recognized on the international level, and that all interessents would have information available regarding the quality of higher education institution and their activity that could be also published on our platform. And looking at the external evaluation cycle, the first stage is, of course, the internal assessment, self-assessment, and preparation of a report. Then first, we, the agency, are working with the compliance report. Then experts are working with their quality assessment and quality assessment report, and they're providing their recommendations, of course. And then the higher education institutions are working with the recommendations, implementing them, and improving their work. And in addition, the licensing of study programs and evaluation of the important changes, this would be additional processes that could be done upon the initiative of higher educational institutions or colleges. And in the beginning, I presented that and told that we have 5 types of assessment. Then we are planning to keep out of them the licensing of study programs, which has proved itself as a valuable and useful assessment procedure, in the result of which higher education institutions and colleges have the right to admit and enroll students. And assessment of important changes will remain only in study programs, and we plan that this type of assessment could be modified by giving more responsibilities to educational institutions while keeping some services that could be provided by us. And the main cyclic system would be the accreditation of higher educational institutions and colleges. So we hope that we will have less administrative burden, that we will put in order our regulatory framework, that we will have clear and understandable evaluation and assessment procedures, and they will be clear for all stakeholders, that we will have more efficient management of higher educational institutions and bigger autonomy, and that we will manage to ensure that improvement of quality culture is based on mutual trust and an understanding. And speaking about further steps, it is clear that we have much work to do, and all of us need work to prepare for that. And the next steps we have marked are that this year and next year, the ministry also mentioned that we will work on drafting an informative report where we will describe the model we present today in more detail. Next year, we will develop and harmonize the regulatory framework. We will start working on adapting the e-platform so that also the accreditation of higher educational institutions and colleges could be performed on the e-platform. We will also draw and develop methodologies and guidelines. And in 2024, we will complete the study direction assessment and accreditation. So we will have done a certain homework so that we could start institutional accreditation. So we plan that after our regulatory enactments will be approved and our methodologies and guidelines will be approved, we will organize workshops and seminars for all stakeholders to explain the processes, criteria, and we will start engaging our assessment experts, because these experts, of course, will have to have other competences than those necessary for evaluating study directions. Of course, we will also implement and test our procedures in the e-platform, and we will provide expect and receive the first applications for institutional accreditation. I hope that we will manage to follow this plan, and whether it will be possible, we will see in the future. So thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I think we'll have much to discuss now during the panel discussion. And now I would like to say thank you, but we will also meet you in the final part, in the question and answer part. But now we are changing our scene here. We are getting ready for the panel discussion, which is an important part of our conference. We will have experts in our panel representing various institutions and organizations. And this conference is, of course, to honor the roadmap for implementation of institutional assessment. And let's stick to work to our panel discussion. Let's start our panel discussion. I will ask our panelists to speak as concise as possible, because we have only 1 hour for discussion and half an hour for questions. But dear participants, dear audience, I would like to remind you about the Zoom chat. Well, you can write your questions or comments either in English or in Latvian to our panelists. Please indicate which person you would like to answer your questions. So we are looking forward to your questions. If there will be no questions, then we will allow ourselves to discuss a bit longer than for an hour, because we will have 6 speakers or panelists, and I will introduce you to them. Richards Blese from the Confederation of Employers of Latvia, Sector of Employment and Working, Mrs. Latviņa from Riga Technical University, from Zoom platform. Inga, do you hear us? Yes. I hope that you can hear me as well. Yes, loud and clear, thank you. The next one, Intra Lūce, Legal College and representative of legal colleges in Latvia, Rūta Muktupāvele, rector of Latvian Academy of Culture and chair of Association of Latvian Rectors, from Alberts College, and Rudolfs Aleksandrs Strots, the president of Latvian Association of Students. I would like you to take and grab your microphone so that our Zoom viewers can listen to us. Feel like home. Please have some water, and we will share the microphone so that everything works properly.
So let's move on with our discussions. No point in wasting time. I would like to begin our discussion with an important keyword, trust. I think that trust is the foundation of everything, of having a system that works and of delivering trustworthy results. So a very important question before we get into greater detail. How do we make sure that the results of institutional accreditation are inspiring trust in the general public, and how to make sure that this ensures the best quality of educational services? Thank you very much. Thank you for giving us this very important question. Speaking of civic society, it's important to underline the category of trust. It is highly significant. Since I represent the space of higher education, I would like to remind you that a year ago, Providus ordered a public survey from Accreditation agency, and it showed that 71% of the population trusts in higher education. This makes me very glad compared to other involved parties and policymakers who have far less trust. In higher education, we see that the public trusts in education. But setting apart the government and the ministries, we see that the situation is as portrayed. I'm sure that interpersonal communication, and here I would like to refer to what Jolanta Silka has said, publicity is important. Publicity is one of the things that ensures mutual trust. And of course, it is highly important for this trust to be mutual. We need to trust the commissions of the parliament that pass the projects for vote. It's important to trust the government and the ministries that are working on the projects for institutional accreditation. It's important to trust our Latvian agency and the procedures they apply. And of course, it's important for the higher education institutions which are going to work within the scope of this system and which are closely linked to all these processes. The involvement of experts is highly pertinent. They need to be competent and they need to be neutral. Involving them is paramount. We have the foundations, we have the legislative framework, and we trust in ICA and in IEC. I would like to remind you that since 2014, a new agency was formed, and since the summer of 2018, it started working. It was quite an anniversary recently, and being a full-fledged member of EMPA and EQUAR, they are quite active. Jolanta Silka is now a member of the board since 2021 of the International EQUAR organization. So I think the work is underway, and it's important for us to feel as part of the ecosystem, even though ecosystem is such a trite notion. But I think it's truly important to interact, to show initiative, and to trust all the participants of the ecosystem. I would like to give the floor to our colleague in Zoom. Thank you for giving me the floor. Now, a few words on trust. I would say that the culture of quality and assessment, which has been sketched in the presentations of previous speakers, is extremely important for trust. Mutual trust creates a good environment. From the standpoint of quality, quality culture is only possible in organizations where mutual trust exists. If there is no trust, then within the higher educational institution, so all the system, its transparency and comprehensiveness becomes compromised, and the quality culture shows the institutional framework. On the state level, on the level of intergovernmental agency cooperation between higher educational institutions and agencies, the situation is similar, in my opinion. Let us examine the stipulations of the law. In Latvia, everyone has the right to quality education. This means that when the quality assurance system is created, we need to work on the quality culture on state level. If the state has quality culture, then we will have mutual trust. Intra, you are representing the opinion of colleges. From the point of view of colleges, what can we say about trust and moving in the right direction? Thank you. I would like to add to the words of Madam Lapiņa on quality culture. In the perspective of the colleges, I think it's important to note that more than 70% of the colleges have assessed the situation and espoused their trust for accreditation. I think it's important to build trust with society, because as we conduct different surveys among the students, we see that most students have chosen particular studies based on the level of recognition the study institution has, and not by the program. So institutional accreditation, in my opinion, will be a tool to strengthen the trust, and it will give the society the confidence in a particular educational institution. They will trust that it is a quality institution, that it has internal quality culture, and I would like to view the future with hope. I think many people, maybe students who are right now choosing to study abroad, will opt for studying in Latvia. Right now, we speak of trust very widely, internally and externally. We could speak a lot about the trust in society and even organize a separate discussion. But on an institutional level, Anna, maybe you could give us your standpoint. What are the aspects that need to be fulfilled in order to keep the trust? Because today, we have seen nice outlines on the screen, but how do we put them into practice? Today, I represent higher educational institutions, and I would like to underline two important points. First of all, looking at it from the ICA and Educational Ministry standpoint, it's important to think about the goal. Today, I have seen the goal outlined by the president of ICA, of course, with the note that it's still up for discussion. It's to stimulate quality, not to control, but to stimulate. And I was very impressed by the words of our Lithuanian colleagues to support quality. Supporting quality, I think it's a great way to state this. Of course, ICA is going to focus on making sure that the process of assessment is of good quality as well. And from an institutional standpoint, in my opinion, we should focus on the results. We need to remember that the accreditation is not for the process, but for the planned results. That's why it exists. And looking at it from the prism of providing support and stimulating quality, I think everything should be a motivating and stimulating process to support the institutions and to make sure that they can grow and develop so that the eventual results that we are moving towards are of even higher quality. It's not that they are not of good quality now, but we know that sometimes there are shortcomings and that there are things that we can work on. So we need to put the insights we have gleaned from the presentations of our Lithuanian and Estonian colleagues into practice. We have heard them speak of development a lot. The word development was repeated. We need to think of development moving forward because I think that right now institutions need to learn that everything is for their sake, and ICANN needs to remember that everything is for the institution's sake. I think it's a very good point. Today, you are representing the employers. What can you say about the students who are graduating educational institutions? Are they up to date? Are they current? Are they complying with the current requirements of the labor market? What conditions should be fulfilled within the framework of the institutional accreditation process so that the employers are confident that the future labor force is ready? Thank you. I am very grateful that you have invited the Employers Confederation to participate in this event. I would like to comment on 2 points: the general trust in society and the results that we get. I think that if quality improves, the results will be better. But speaking of the quality of education, process is important because on all stages of the process, it needs to be fulfilled. We have discussed a lot about the regulatory enactments and about aiming for the future, about submitting self-assessment reports. These are different stages. I think that from the perspective of employers, it is important to make sure that the accreditation process stimulates the efficiency of the system and strategic awareness so that higher educational institutions can use the accreditation process to assess how well they can reach their goals and how well they set their goals. I believe that this is the most significant point, not to set the same bar for everyone, but to make sure that when we work in institutional accreditation, it's meaningful. And we need to work hand in hand with educational institutions so that the follow-up is impactful. I think it's important to make sure that the process is individualized. There is no one-fits-all solution. Everything needs to be tailor-made. I think the seal of approval is the fact that the institution is included in the ECHA registry. This means that they can comply with all the guidelines and the criteria of the European Union. This is a good sign that we can trust our Latvian agency. And the last point I would like to make, speaking of trust, it is extremely important to know what are the results of the current accreditation process, because all the experts, including the employer experts, care to see whether their recommendations are being put in practice, and in this way the quality of the studies is improved. I think there's a lot to be done to ensure good foundations for further accreditation. Thank you. I think we need to take into account the recommendations of all the parties and to involve everyone. So I'm glad to see the president of the Latvian Student Association. What is the view of Latvian students today? What do they think of institutional accreditation, and what conditions should be fulfilled to make sure that the system works and the students feel involved and fully involved in the process? Here, I think the important thing is internal culture, to make sure that the students feel safe and confident that the transition is smooth. You need to involve students in the internal quality processes. It means that higher educational institutions need to take greater responsibility of their processes. If students see that they are involved too, they are actively involved, that they are not just being listened to, but that they are heard by the institutions, this will enhance trust from the students and the graduates. After all, most of society are graduates. They used to be students. That's why they trust in higher education. So ensuring the trust from students is ensuring greater trust subsequently. We need to highlight this word culture. We seem to understand what culture means. I will allow myself to be naive as the moderator. I don't know what kind of culture we're really talking about. There have been different opinions, but could you go deeper? What is this culture? And maybe we can give comments about the culture in Latvia and in our neighboring countries. Perhaps I, as a representative of the theory of culture, would like to start. Culture is harmony and order compared to chaos. Of course, chaos can be creative, but at the same time, talking about institutional accreditation, here we need order. Order needs to be implemented in the development of the process, in the way it is being carried out, to make sure that we all together are moving forth for a good quality standard at the highest level. At the same time, talking about culture, we need to remember that it is a tool. Culture is a tool to reach quality. And I remember that a few years ago, Professor Aldis Kowskis, during a panel discussion, underlined that we must not view quality as something static, as a point of departure that never changes. Then we will stagnate and even regress, and we will lose the quality. We need to remember that quality is a process, and all the time, constantly, we need to work on it by performing institutional accreditation, by performing our acts. We need to think of quality going forward. Quality goes hand in hand with everything else. We cannot think, okay, we have gotten the accreditation, now we can do nothing. That's, in my opinion, a rather poor signal if anyone does that. So I think quality and culture go hand in hand. They are mutually linked things.
I see Inga has raised her hand, but before that, I would like to give mic to Anna because I saw that you were nodding and shaking your head when we speak about the games of the rules of the game. Are there some issues that should be resolved? Does everybody understand? Yes, this is the correct question. Because also among experts, and when I work with my colleagues and participate in discussions, I see that not all understand what does quality means. There are quality policy, quality management, quality insurance, quality systems, etc., etc. And first, that would be first. And if we speak about culture, then it is important to remember that culture is a broader notion than compliance with the regulatory enactments. Here we have to speak about responsibility, ethics, fairness. This is something more broader than mere compliance with regulatory enactments. And working in the Study Quality Commission and having read separate self-evaluation reports, we see that on the level of separate institutions, it has been concluded. And I assume that this is because our colleagues are on the start mark towards reaching the highest level. Yes, there is this documentation, but it has not been implemented. So on one hand, Jolanta Silka already said that it is necessary that we have documents, that we have documentary evidence, but it is also important that this is evidence, not only documents. So this understanding about culture, that it is something deeper than we might think at the first moment. We should ensure that we all have understanding, and I am not sure of myself that I'm fully aware of it. So this is, of course, the first step towards raising quality when we understand what we should improve for ourselves. Inga, now we give floor to you. Thank you. I think I could provide a lecture on culture because I'm teaching exactly on quality, but I would like to give some keywords for this discussion. So culture is built from values, and this means that when we are speaking about quality culture, it means that a particular organization or person, it is not relevant, that they have culture, equality as a value. Value means that it gives us some added value and that we put it high. We understand that it is important for us. And from this keyword, at this moment, I usually say that we don't have to look far. We can see at classics, for example, Mr. Deming have said that quality culture is what we do when no one is looking. It is something we do, how we behave, and who we are. And if we are speaking about higher educational institution, what we are, in fact. And as we are heading towards a new model, I would say that I see in the future that each organization, university, higher education institution, according to its type, has developed their internal quality system, and they are developing their quality culture. The keywords are those that this quality is changing constantly. The quality is not a static and fixed notion, because something fixed, we can check it whether it is or not. This is a fixed part, which can also be changed, but in a certain period of time. But quality is an ever-changing notion. It is adapting, adjusting. So the ideal scenario, to my mind, is that experts at any moment could enter our institution, and we would be able to show them our quality system, and they could evaluate our quality culture, not after 3 or 7 years, but on everyday basis, because this is our culture, this is our everyday. Oh, this is a very high measure that we can control something within ourselves internally. This is important, but I wanted to speak about something we also saw from the presentations from Estonia and Lithuania, the self-evaluation reports and their quality, and the question, a complicated question, how to ensure that institutions in these reports would not describe and would not provide descriptions giving the set number of words, but would actually analyze the, would do some analysis, would be self-critical, would provide actual information, how to arrive at this point. Is this related to some changes in culture? Are there some practical methods we could apply? Thank you. From the point of view of students, we also send our people to accreditation and we receive feedback, and there are different feedbacks. And what I would like to suggest is please involve students. I don't want to say that, but well, actually we are a free workforce. They face study programs themselves. They can show you the strengths and weaknesses, pros and cons, and what works and what not. Because sometimes the people who draw up the self-evaluation reports, they do not face all situations themselves. And the students are those who are aware or not that their education they are gaining is of quality. So you can invite the students, you can send your report to them for reviewing. This is one type that one type of using the resources you don't have to pay for, but what resources you have that you can use to evaluate the internal quality report. So this is an invitation to maintain status quo or to involve even more the students. Well, sometimes this is a status quo issue, and sometimes it's even more. Well, I don't think that we should invite students less to participate in this process, but there are universities and maybe not. This is a more specific to particular study programs where this academic personnel sometimes see the student as some sort of enemy. The student says, we need improvements there and there. Why aren't you doing anything? But this, the reason for this is because students are looking for better education with the resources they see and they have. And this is an internal opinion that can be used. We have an overall common goal, a better, recognizable higher education. And here we have to change our mindset when we see a student not as an enemy, but as a friend and an assistant. And also me, myself, not only as a moderator, but also as a representative of students, is that I can support this opinion. Thank you. To my mind, also, this seminar and conference is very focused and very, and it pays attention to several aspects that are important to ensuring institutional accreditation. And I very like the Estonian example in terms of training for the representatives of higher educational institutions of how to report, how to write self-evaluation reports. But I have to say that our colleagues, also ICA, has organized similar seminars, and that I don't think they will stop organizing such seminars in the future. And this is necessary to ensure that all stakeholders would support the essence and would support writing the real meaning in the reports, not only broad descriptions. And we have also to ensure that we have a mechanism, a support of how to ensure that. And because we will all benefit from it, we will save our time, we will save our human resources, so that we would not represent ourselves in a more attractive way, but to ensure that these self-evaluation reports are useful both for students, for general public, for employers, for the whole higher educational area. I wanted to also mention some words, but first I wanted to return what Ms. Lapina said about quality management and expert visits. And just I would like to agree that this would be a valuable practice when experts, when we will arrive at institutional experts, that they would have this internship as well, if we may say so, to visit educational institution to check this quality management, the quality management system, the existence and operation of these systems, because as we can see of what is related to institutional accreditation, this quality management will be one of the most important aspects in this assessment process and in the overall operation. And the second thing, speaking about self-evaluation report, is also here I have a small comment. When we are writing a self-evaluation report for the study directions at the current moment, there are several working groups working on this self-evaluation report, and including we engage students more or less, but from my experience, I have to say that students can also be not so active, and they are active when something needs to be organized, but when something needs to be written, they are not so active sometimes. But I can agree with you that yes, when we are writing this self-evaluation report, each working group wants to say as much as possible. And so we have this empty words in the report because we want to tell and tell and tell. And I agree that ICA is organizing training in this regard, but maybe, yes, we could define criteria, a more defined criteria, what this analytical part should look like, and those most important points. Maybe this also would made us more focused, and we would pay more attention. We would not tell and tell and tell and include many words, but we would provide this analytical part more. Anna? I wanted to emphasize two things. The first, equality. And to my mind, this analysis or lack of analysis might be related to two things. The first thing is our previous culture, the experience of previous accreditations, the previous practice, which is more related to representation of facts of the current situation instead of the analytical part, which is the today's requirement. And I think we are studying together, so the self-evaluation reports will be of better quality in the next round. So I would like to request, because ICA has organized, I think, brilliant seminars for this accreditation cycle. They have discussed each accreditation aspect separately, and they devoted separate seminar for each aspect. But the time has passed. We have forgotten something. Sometimes the specialists have changed at the universities, but there are new directions today, and new people are getting ready for the accreditation. And maybe some people were not paying so much attention to these issues because these seminars were organized 2 years ago when the accreditation process were rather far for them at that point. But maybe some paid courses can be organized now. I don't know. And the second thing is whether or not can we trust? Because if we say that something is not so brilliant with our institution, are we afraid that experts will come and check us to punish us? Because I can say an example, tell about an example, when we had a critical self-evaluation and we were very afraid of this expertise and from these experts, but experts were of high opinion that we are aware of our problems. And they didn't evaluate and they didn't see it is a bad thing because they saw that we see our problems and that we are going to, and that we are working on improving them. But for us, it was a positive surprise. I wish you more such surprises. So this is the issue. If we trust our experts, that if we present the actual situation, whether or not this will be turned against us. And I will pick up from where Anna finished because I wanted to start from trust. So self-evaluation is only related to trust, whether or not we trust the person or institution we're writing the report for. So if we evaluate ourselves, then how do we evaluate this? This must be data-based, information-based, and fact-based. It means that we, in the self-evaluation report, must include the criteria and facts where we don't describe something, but we show figures, data, aspects that are the grounds of our analysis. And if we will have such a part, then the analysis will be easier to be carried out. Then we have the good example from Estonia. I think you noticed there was one slide saying that experts are writing 2 recommendations. One is the part where they speak about the minimum or mandatory requirements for meeting the standards. And the second part is the guidelines that can be used to improve their situation. And we should, in fact, separate these 2 things because we have to exclude the subjective evaluation of experts because we all have our subjective experience. We should ensure that the self-evaluation report is based on facts and figures. Richard? Yeah, maybe I will repeat, but I think it is important that all of us, and I think we can be critical of it, we should be sure that quality management system is not pain or additional thing consuming our resources, but a measure of how to do things more qualitatively and more cost efficiently. And here we can speak with regards to institutions and our parliament and etc. And the second thing is very important, so that self-evaluation report is a tool not only for external evaluation, but also for internal evaluation. And all higher educational institutions should be assured that what they have written in this report, they can use. And this report is not written for anyone else but yourself. So this structure could also be changed, taking into considerations my colleagues just mentioned here in the panel. Speaking about the data part, I think that the state should do everything that data is requested once. So not each institution would require data every time they need it, but once the data is submitted, then through information systems, this data could be accessed. And this would also leave more resources for performing analysis and for doing this self-analysis and self-evaluation. And this goes hand in hand. And Jolanta also told that we have to reduce the bureaucratic burden. We have to have this clear understanding that this will have more meaning, it will be more meaningful, and this process is complicated. I'm totally not jealous of the higher educational institutions that have to undergo this, but we should go towards some kind of effectivization in this field. But I wanted to stress how training and studies is important, and ICA and Academic Information Center, your work is enormous and great compared to the systems we had formerly. And this is one of the reasons why we have shown good results overall. And one more thing is the work of coordinators. And I think that we should learn from our Estonian colleagues, and they emphasize this, that coordinators are participating in the process of preparing the self-evaluation report. So they have this link with agency from the very first moment. It is not a black box. Self-evaluation report is not a black box we only open at the agency. This has to be done in close cooperation with the agency from the very beginning. So maybe this is another aspect that could improve our quality. We already spoke about reducing the bureaucratic burden. Do you believe that we will manage this? Less paperwork, less other processes? How would you comment this? Because I think that representatives of institutions that are looking at us, they are hoping for something to be made more easier. Well, there are two things. To my mind, the accreditation itself will become more difficult. It will be performed in more depth. It will have to be more accurate because this is the assessment of the whole institution with sample programs or directions, but still this accreditation will be broader, wider, more complicated, but what will be easier and what makes me happy is that the number of procedures will be smaller. So we will have more time for the self-evaluation report. For example, we know we have to accredited study direction. Next year, we have to perform accreditation for study field. And next year we'll have institutional accreditation. There is no time for development. So I caught your idea that if we perform assessment, then we do it once and thoroughly, not year by year. Yes. I think that accreditation will be made more complex, but it will be easier because there will be one accreditation instead of 10 other accreditations. We will save time and resources for preparing for in-depth analysis and in-depth accreditation, and then implementation of recommendations, instead of doing writing self-evaluation reports 10 years in a row for different accreditations. Yes, I think that this accreditation will be more responsible, because one accreditation will give a permit for our directions and programs. If now an institution has a 5 or 6 study directions, we are doing step by step. We receive different accreditation terms. So in this moment, the responsibility will be larger, because with one accreditation, we will examine all study programs that are implemented. This is something. And from the benefits, speaking about the benefits, and one of the benefits is the saving of financial resources. But of course, we are not aware of the cost of institutional accreditation. This is also our hopes that maybe this could be a bit less expensive, but maybe not. About complicatedness and complexity, I wouldn't like to say that this next institutional accreditation during the report and during the accreditation process will be more complicated, but it will be more responsible. We will have to be more responsible, because now, as we undergo a study program, study direction accreditations, more or less we can see now what was also shown on the presentation, those assessment criteria. And now we have already implemented these criteria while accrediting the study directions. Of course, this is something different than institutional accreditation, but we have taken these steps already. But to my mind, when performing institutional accreditation, these steps will be taken with other responsibility and with other maybe criteria.
Other comments, please? Yes. From the point of view of cooperation partners, this will be easier for us as well, because we also delegate experts for all these visits. They might overlap. From our perspective, this will also take off some of the load off our shoulders, because we need to find students who more or less understand the topics, but from another higher education institutions. So if it's a unique program for Latvia, we really need to fight tooth and nail to find such a student and to make sure that they are ready to go. I also had the opportunity of being an expert in the course of a few visits, and that was a very interesting experience, because I was to the same institution both times, and I'm reading this report. I'm thinking, oh, I have seen this sometime. I'm recognizing the same words. I think the authors of the reports can really recite the reports by heart. I think it will be useful for cooperation partners to have more time to seek the experts and to train them so that they are knowledgeable and really capable of appreciating the quality. I will give the floor to Inga and Richards, and then we'll move on to the next question. Yes, I have a very brief comment. Of course, it's a very progressive step from the point of view of educational institutions. The level of bureaucracy depends entirely on higher educational institutions, on the system that's going to be created. As it's going to be conceived, that's the way it's going to go forward. So here there are a lot of questions. And I would also assess positively what I have heard from the ministry and from ICOM about the fact that they are going to develop a methodology. So the level of bureaucracy will depend on the methodology. I would like to add that, in my opinion, the goal has the key role. The goal determines the resources that are going to be implemented, because if our goal is to control, to close institutions, then the higher education institution will invest resources in passing, in withstanding the assault, and in surviving. If the goal is to support and help to survive, then the higher education institution will also be more oriented on growth. So the goal will determine. I'm sure that there will be, probably the resources will be allocated in the same way, but the distribution and the approach will be different. So it's important to agree on the goal. We have a beautiful word, maturity, or briedums in Latvian. I would like to speak of this system maturity. How mature is the higher educational system? Will it be mature in the near future? Because we need to finish the current project, we need to move on to the next ones. Are we mature, and what are the maturity criteria? I think we can say that there are no other options but yes. I think higher education institutions are mature, and I think this topic is nothing new. I remember in the times of Minister of Education Shadurskis, there were discussions about yearly cyclical accreditations. There were discussions about doing it by programs or by directions, and there were ideas about moving to institutional accreditation. I think this drive is, in my opinion, originating in the very years of Latvian restored independence. I think back then that's how we conceptualized the higher educational space for our country. What testifies to our maturity? From the start, we have unequivocally moved towards the European experience in quality assurance. We haven't created something local, independent, and isolated. No North Korean models. We were open. We were moving towards approaching European best practices and taking over their best experiences. We have worked very consciously on an institutional level and on policy level. Our Ministry of Education, all the staff, all the employees, all the directors have been constantly comparing themselves to others, and we are a fully fledged member of the European higher educational environment. And in this space, we are operating with the same values and are participating in the same activities. I think this is something that is one of the signals of our maturity. Another thing I would like to mention is that we ourselves need to be proactive in this process. I think that right now, higher educational institutions have shown that they have grown a lot. I have been a rector for 8 years, and I have enough experience to compare what we have had and what we have now. I think development is a word that sets us behind. Growth and even transformation is more apt. We have experienced a lot of growth, and I think accreditation is going to be an impulse for further transformation. Yes, we have greater risk, but it is worth it. I'm sure that this will not mean that some programs fail and will be closed. I think it will lead to a mobilization of all resources. There is no room for simulation. This will give true effects. We see that higher education institutions have grown. It's not about avoidance, not about hiding. That's not how things are done. And I think this too testifies to the internal preparedness that we have within the institutions. I think it's a very logical moment that we need to note. So I say yes. We have heard about several important moments that testify to maturity. I would like to add, what do we observe? Is it a homogeneous space or do we see differences? Yes, I would like to echo the remarks about maturity. I think our colleagues have been ready for accreditation, but speaking of maturity as a whole, I have been working in accreditation related matters for about 24 years. I have been on both sides, both as a representative of an institution that is accredited and as a person who is involved in accrediting someone. And I've given 22 years to colleges. So I think with my experience, we can compare how we started almost a quarter century ago, what were the criteria, what were the processes, then the requirements were increased, then we moved on to the accreditation of study directions. This was rife with many challenges, and then with every passing year, we've been developing, we've been growing, we've been moving on the international arena, we've been developing international cooperation, and now I think we have arrived at the point where we are mature. We are ready for the next step, that's institutional accreditation. You've asked us whether everyone is equally mature. Of course, that's never going to happen. We can never say that everyone is mature everywhere, but on the college level, I think 70% are ready to move from study direction accreditation to institutional accreditation. Of course, always someone will say no, 10% say no without any clarifications, and 20% say yes, we are ready, but we want to know the rules of the game. So I think from these statistic indicators, we can say that colleges are ready, are mature to move on forward. I didn't want to cast a shadow on the colleges. Indeed, these are good indicators. I would like to add a few words. I think that there are differences between higher educational institutions, among different higher educational institutions, and that's normal because we have some that are focused on one thing, some on the other. I think everyone needs to set their own individual level and then raise their own individual level. The accreditation of programs had its individual goals. Study direction accreditation had different goals. It gave some added value. And now we are moving to institutional accreditation. I think this will signal institutional maturity. If someone was lacking the maturity, this will raise the level and stimulate the maturity. I think this is very logical. Once the system has reached a certain maturity level, we can move on to the next one. And those who had something lacking will be able to pull themselves up to the next level. The process will stimulate them and help them reach the goal. I think this is the right moment to do so. Thank you to everyone who has sent questions. I see that we have a few questions coming in the chat, and you are welcome to ask more questions. We'll try to find the answers to all the questions. I would like to get a few more practical insights. We have talked about different things. We have talked about successfully moving towards institutional accreditation, about training, but now maybe we can sum up what can happen so that higher education institutions become more ready, so that the remaining 20% can say that they are definitely ready, and the last 10% say finally that they are ready too. What can we do? Anna, now my inner lawyer is woken up because my first profession is a lawyer. I would like to say that I want us not to repeat the previous shortcomings. I don't want to say previous flaws, but previous shortcomings. Because as my colleague has said, many people say that first they want to get the rules of the game and then they want to move to the accreditation. I want us to make sure that we all get the rules of the game, so that institutions get enough time from the moment when the rules of the game are determined to the moment of accreditation, so that there's enough time for internal analysis. Of course, institutions have the materials, but if this is a new accreditation model, if there are new criteria or conditionally new criteria, then it means that every higher education institution needs to have time to assess their preparedness for each criteria. In the beginning, Dr. Jansson, representing the ministry, said that we want to avoid minimal standards. We want to aim for the maximum. We want to aim for international trends. And if we want to introduce everything in a timely and efficient fashion, then from the moment where we decide what we want, we need to give institutions enough time to make sure that they can analyze everything, that they can introduce improvements, that they can make sure that they are growing. As my colleague has said, not just development, but growth. So everyone needs enough time to put things into practice and to raise the bar. Because the last accreditation for me as a lawyer inspired a lot of contradictory feelings. ICA was working during the summer, and by the end of the summer, we had the guidelines. The first institutions submitted their self-assessments in November. It means that within 2 months, they needed to write a self-assessment report, and that takes a lot of time. Normally, we are spending a year on this to involve all the parties, the employers, the staff, the students. All of this needs time, and writing takes time because we are a small institutions, and we had to prepare 1,500 pages. I have seen materials that are just dozens of folders. It takes a lot of time. So we need to give the institutions enough time to work on the text. I also liked the comments from our Lithuanian colleagues who said that the first round was in my opinion, a sort of re-accreditation. So in cooperation with partners, you go through this first round to see who you are and what are the moments where you can improve. So after the first round, you must not close the institutions, not because we are afraid of it, but we need to ask what is the goal? Why are we doing it? If we want trust, if we want openness and growth, we need time and support. So it's an MVP approach from the realm of business. We need to figure out what we need to improve and keep going. Inta, what can you add? Yes, please. Yes, I would like to add. I agree with what the colleague has said. I think it's important to underline the communication of all the participants of the process. There should be different seminars, informal communication, when you know that you can ask for advice. I think sometimes we are afraid, we are hesitant. Maybe it's something related to our national character, national mentality. I shouldn't ask, I shouldn't bother anyone, but we should. And we should be able to get reasonable professional answers from quality supervision coordinators, from experts, so that we can be sure that we are working together and that we are going towards this goal together of having a good quality level, of raising the bar of quality together. I think communication is another important key point, so that we don't lose each other, and moving towards institutional accreditation, we keep everything else.
Viedoklis, kas nepieciešams studējušiem, lai veiksmīgi.
And what do students think with regard to this process? Similarly to the institutions, we also need time and information, because in the current system, we have this material we can hand down and hand over to the new experts, where we can warn them where attention should be paid more or less. This is what we have accrued over time. So as we will have this new process, this process will start from the scratch again. And similarly to employers, maybe we need the basic information, what we could give these new experts when we are inviting them to participate. And also here, I hope that student representatives will be necessary, and I see they are nodding heads, meaning that there will be necessary students. And it means that we will have to devote more time to prepare the student experts. Therefore, the clarity regarding the system, the basic things that need to be known by an expert, and the procedure, how this process is run, what we can tell students, what they can expect from this process as a whole. And before we start answering the questions from the chat, I will speak from the employers. Yes, the situation is as like that. It is important to have time enough, and so that we would know the goals and responsibilities of each stakeholder. And this is also important with regards to expert development. And I think it would be important by 2024, 2025 to start a project or activity where universities can learn about internal quality management system improvements. Maybe our neighbors from Estonia and Lithuania can assist us and support us with these things, so that we could learn from each other, and so that in this 2024 or 2025, we would be more ready for this new system. And speaking about employers, well, it is clear that the role of the employer will change, and we will have to understand what it could be like. There are several versions, but until now, the experts were selected according to the specifics of the study directions. But now we see that there will be necessary some additional competences and skills. Maybe the experts will have to assess the link between the higher education and labor market, but maybe this university business cooperation, how the society and university and the business is cooperating, and such aspects. And this is something broader than the usual competence of employers, employer representatives in this process. So we will have to learn and study. And this is another aspect, but there is another important thing which will gain more significance. This is the involvement of employers in the internal quality insurance systems. While we had more work to do when working with external quality systems, then I think our role in the internal quality systems will grow. And I think that our role here will grow and increase. So we need to work to develop this model in the future. have to involve students, graduates, employers more in this internal quality assurance processes and how to do it meaningfully. And maybe a participation in board and meeting only once a year is not the best mechanism for doing that. Of course, there are three things. So our role will change and maybe we will have some more responsibilities. As a graduate, I also agree, graduates should also be involved in this process because retrospectively they can affect things. And this is another possibility for the graduates to raise the value of the university you have graduated from, because this is the value opportunity to improve also your diploma, right? Although you have graduated 10 years ago, you still graduated from that university with the reputation. I'm absolutely, I agree with all my colleagues. But there is one more thing I would like to add, and this is that when we start something new, or when we transfer to something new, and Latvia has taken already two important steps. With the amended higher education law, we have divided the institutions into types. So the institutional accreditation will differ from type to type. And this is important because the criteria and the methodologies will also probably, well, the methodology will be similar, the criteria could be similar, but these indicators and levels will differ. And this means that this system first has to be built, and only then we can say that this is how we are going to do this. And the second thing is that at least in public universities, we have a different governance model. And here we have to understand that now we have strategic directions and specializations, which modifies strategically everything related to assessment and involvement and engagement. And third, our colleagues from ICA, well, they should remember when creating the system, this good example from Estonia, which is actually also stated by international agencies, that this coordinator is involved in the process from the beginning. For example, in EQAR evaluation, there are 2 years, and there is a person the organization can work with 2 years before accreditation to get ready for the accreditation, and only then they write the self-evaluation report, and only then the accreditation process starts. So this is approximately a period of 3 years before the accreditation while you are getting ready for the accreditation. Of course, I'm not inviting to start a 3-year pre-accreditation process, but this could be considered. And dear colleagues, you probably also know that we have also colleagues from the general education, secondary education, that have shifted towards institutional accreditation, and they are in this element, in this stage. And Richard probably know that they have trained their specialists, their principals, and maybe we can take some best examples from Latvia, from the secondary education here. Thank you for your opinions, but we won't stop here. We have some questions in the Zoom chat. If you have some more questions, please send them in. I quickly looked at those questions, and maybe we can discuss some of those questions with our colleagues from the ministry and ICA, because we will have some short question and answer session after the panel discussion. But now we'll start with the questions with our panelists. Inguna Blese. Is it planned in the evaluation process to take into consideration the specifics of the higher educational institutions, for example, the strategic specialization or the special role? I think we just answered this question. Well, I think, yes, of course. Well, because why did we work on those types and strategic specialities? I think that, yes, that our colleagues will be wise enough to take that into consideration. So I think that yes. And where is this different in this evaluation process? What should be taken into consideration when we are paying attention to different types of colleges? Are there some peculiarities we should? Well, yes, there are criteria. So these types are not an empty shells. There are, in the law, there are specific criteria, and according to these criteria, the institutional accreditation requirements should be built so that we could answer and implement this procedure in a concise manner. Of course, there will be some universal requirements. It's natural, but that these types should be taken into consideration. That's a matter of fact. And I would like to add here that one of the things that might be different and that should be different in assessing the different educational institutions is the research activity, because for colleges, well, they won't have as such a research activity as for applied sciences or art universities or something like that. Another question, Anita leads, and two questions. To what level of detail each separate study direction should be evaluated within the accreditation level of detailization? I think that this would be a question for the Ministry of Education. Well, I think let's leave this question to them. And the second question, but I have some more. How the follow-up procedure should be planned to ensure efficient improvement of recommendations and improvements, and could it be made more broader, for example, like seminars or workshops like it is in Finland? So the follow-up, and if we look at the internal systems, and it is easier for me as a student to speak about internal systems, well, I think this information, the results must be made available, and they should be widely available. Maybe, well, and in some form, they will, of course, will be published for the personnel and for the students. And this would be necessary for the students also to answer to understand how to continue our cooperation. But about the cooperation, well, I understand that I agree that this is a feedback, and without the feedback, no process has a meaning, right? And also currently, the universities are cooperating within their segmentation or within their types and typologies. And of course, the international cooperation. And in fact, we are having it already now. But if we only speak about this institutional accreditation, then it's something a must-have. Well, how else if not by sharing your experience, and you will learn your mistakes. As we say, the wise ones learn from other mistakes. And I wanted to add here that this follow-up procedure is something new that we can add to the Academic Information Center and ICA. And before we didn't have this. And as with many things that have been implemented for the first time, there are many opportunities for improvements. And I think that this is one of the processes where we can think of how to develop and grow from this point on. And in the terms of institutional accreditation, it has even more. Anna and then Inga. First, I think that when we speak about the institutional practice, the many things have changed, because this is a separate criteria we have to show, and often we cannot do that within 1 year. So we are constantly in need of tracking it. And I wanted to mention once more what Inga Lapina said, that We have to establish a form for providing information, because it's a very positive thing that the recommendations are split into two parts, short-term and long-term accreditation. So the experts would say that these are the things you should do now in the short term, and these are the things you should do in the long term. And so these recommendations could be divided into must-have, and these could be optional recommendations, because that would improve your situation, but it is not mandatory for you, because the expert opinions are based on their personal experience, and sometimes there are more suggestions of how to improve the current situation, and maybe experts show the particular way how you should move towards your results. But it is important to perform the mandatory things and to think of what is desired. I will partly answer to the first question, which was left for the ministry. And first, regarding the level of detail, how study direction should be assessed. I will put this question in other words. If we look at the fact that we have, well, 4 mandatory fields of how this model could be built, what standards could we have, and I think Estonian or Lithuanian colleagues show that there's areas they would assess. So we don't know that yet. This would be the future question for us. We should discuss about, because this is the key whether or not we will succeed. But these areas are specified in the law. And this is environment, infrastructure, inclusion, material resources, the technical aids, etc., including also the environment, the physical environment. And this should not be assessed in detail, because this is the place, object in which something takes place, and everything has to be, what is available at the university should be made available to everyone equally. The second thing is management, and this is also similar to everyone. The university works as it works, and we can show that. And then there are 2 fields. One is goals. What goal has this institution? This institution has, and my colleague said that there are these strategic specializations, and if there are several strategic specializations, we should look at them. And the 4th one is the process and content. And in this part where we speak about the process and content, there are possibilities that in line with the strategic specializations or fields, this could differ whether this is of enough detail or not. But what to do with this follow-up procedure? Well, this is a procedure that is, well, basically very valuable for the educational institution to avoid the situation I mentioned in the beginning, when various activities are launched as campaigns, as the set years approach. So follow-up basically means that when we have recommendations from experts, and I agree with what Anna said, that we have short-term, long-term, and other types of recommendations. But when we receive those recommendations, we write down our answer of how we will work with these recommendations over the next 3 or 7 years. It doesn't matter. So every year we should have some point of reference, and we should understand whether we have managed or not to fulfill these recommendations. And here we could speak not only about implementing these recommendations, but also about implementing our results and goals. So this could be some kind of short report of how we have accomplished this year. And about the workshops and seminars, our colleagues from ICA and in collaboration with the ministry, we have participated in many valuable workshops. We have shared our experiences. We have shared our best experiences, and think we should continue doing that. Thank you for your answers. And now I would like to invite you to send your questions to our colleagues from ICA and the ministry, because they will join us shortly. But maybe some final words from our panelists. What are those things that we should take into account? What are the risks we haven't spoken yet about to reach the overall goal, which is quality? So what would you like to emphasize or underline, what we should remember? Well, I think the sooner we will receive some kind of guidelines or concepts, and thank you here for what we saw in the presentation today. You made us very happy with the 3-year transitional period, but some specific particularities, so that we could be able to get ready for that in time, because this is a very responsible process, an important process, and we are looking forward to cooperation, of course. I would like to see that the seminars, workshops would be regular events, so that all ambiguities could be resolved in time, so that we could move forward in good time and with good knowledge. And I would also like to suggest that we could agree on the format in which different materials would be made available to us: seminar presentations or suggestions or guidelines or regulatory documents. Maybe they could be made available at a specific platform, not something at the ministry, something at the ICA, or so that we could have one single platform where we know that all the information necessary for the process is available there. That would definitely make this whole process easier, but in all other way. Thank you, and let's go forward. And the suggestions, Richard? Yes. Well, many things have been said, and I want to repeat that we need these internal quality systems. They has to be ready. The bureaucratic burden should be reduced, and new criteria should be formed instead of copying all of the previous criteria into a new list. And this is a work on a new structure and not of recombining the previous ones. And to my mind, it's important to ensure that this information presented by the universities is analyzed by the agency, and it is important to provide the feedback so that we know at the very first moment that this process has high value added. And this is the first time we are paying attention to the overall activities of the university. And this is the possibility where we can reassure anyone at the university that this has meaning and this is meaningful activity. And speaking about risks that should be prevented, well, agency will have to start accreditation once again. And it is important that those planned processes would not delay the next processes we are working towards, so that everything would be made according to the EQAR guidelines and standards. And another thing which is important is that we have to prepare the universities and we have to prepare experts, because this will be a new process, and maybe also they have to participate in some kind of experience sharing and changing events, because they are among the key persons in this process. And I don't think we spoke about this aspect today, but today also the recent amendments to the laws said that we have the possibility to develop the micro qualifications, professional, vocational education and training to level 5th, 6th, and 7th. And this is also an education regarding which state recognized diplomas can be attributed. And we have to think that how we can include that in this quality assurance and evaluation system. So this is another thing which is not completely clear for all of us. And we should remember of this when we speak about this new system. Rudolf? Yes, thank you. Well, it's clear that institutional accreditation will be something we look from up to down. But I want to say that we don't have to look from too much up above us, because we need to remember that we have to have the ability to oversee all those levels. And we have to remember the available resources. And we have to remember that this process can be run smoothly without any major problems by involving all the stakeholders. But currently we don't have many bad feelings about the process. We are looking forward to this process. And when we will see it, we will have more information. But now we're just more waiting for that. I wanted to add about the future risks that we might see. But first, about the support. Yes, ICA has supported educational institutions as they prepare for the accreditation. But what I can say that, well, when we will start institutional accreditation, then ICA will have to double their capacity, because the support the educational institutions will require, they will require at least twice as more this support. But speaking about risks, and many colleges have also mentioned this risk, is experts. Because when we are performing the accreditation of study directions, there are it is easier for experts to find experts for the study directions, but there is risk. The risk is professional experts when accrediting vocational educational institutions. And speaking about training for the educational institutions, in order to write self-evaluation reports and to prepare for the institutional accreditation. But I think that here it is also important to prepare and to train experts to select the correct and appropriate experts, to engage them according to the criteria we are going to evaluate. And this is one of the things that might pose a risk big enough. Anna, I wanted to draw our attention to one technical issue. And I like that we are speaking about policy, about big issues. And now we are speaking about details and criteria. And on one hand, this is a technical issue, but on the other hand, it is still very important in the context we have now, to reduce bureaucracy, to focus on specialization, to focus on the types of the institutions, and so on. But what we missed today, that after the reform and after the typology of the universities, there is a trend towards the situation that we will have to undergo two accreditations, because we are speaking about institutional accreditation, but in the future, the existence of universities will depend on the accreditation of scientific activity and research activity. And here we see that our colleagues in Estonia and Lithuania, this is a single process for them. Research science is one of the criteria for their institutional accreditation. But now we have applied sciences, which means that there are universities with more professional programs, with who work closer with employers, who work more with applied research, and still they will have to undergo the accreditation of scientific accreditation, which will determine whether or not they will be able to operate. And I think this is an important issue for the art universities, because the creative work and creative results are more important for them. And whether this science is required on such a high level as for applied universities, well, this is a question we can discuss. So we would like, I would like to invite to remember to discuss whether we need two accreditations, because there are two types of institutions now. I don't want to cross something out. Well, of course, the scientific activities must be performed at applied universities and the art universities, but still science is a part of study process. And the scientific institution with fundamental research, with a specific personnel, specific staff. Well, this is something completely different, and we have to take that into account. Inga, you have raised your hand. Yes, I would like to add some future comment. I will try to make it not final. In Latvia, we have an interesting trend, and it is not typical for Estonia and Lithuania. Sometimes it is in our neighbor countries, but it is more popular with Latvia. And we have beautiful initiatives. And in Estonia, they implement these initiatives, but in Latvia, we often have them only on the level of such seminars and conferences, but when we start things in the real life, we fail. Well, why it is so depends from time to time, but now I would like to invite our colleagues from the ministry and other policy makers. I would like to invite you to remember that this initiative is brilliant and very good, and we have been working with it for a long time, but any initiative needs resources for implementing it. And we have not spoken about resources behind this great reform of the system. And here are two risks, basically. And one of the risks is what my colleagues already mentioned about the experts, because the experts will cost more, and this procedure could be of the same costs for the universities, because we will have to pay more and because there will be other requirements. And this is one thing. And the other thing is that currently in Latvia, we have a model, and Anna already spoke about that, is that the science is living a kind of separate life from the overall processes at the university. And this would not be the right choice. We should integrate science and research, and we would have, and it would be necessary for us to think how could we integrate it. And also about students, we have to understand that universities are working, and there are processes and the results, and the student goes through the process, and then we have the quantitative result, the student with a diploma who works for our economy and gives us value added. So the process is what the student experiences. So maybe the principal money goes after the student. This element should be reconsidered in Latvia, because first we have a study process and then we have result. Maybe we should consider this in the future. And thank you. With this answer, we will complete our discussion on the question and answer session. I know that we can't hear you, but dear listeners in Zoom meeting room, under your window, you have the reactions window. So please let us know if you have some reactions you would like to applaud us for. Thank you to our panelists, and many thumbs up, your reactions and rounds of applause. Thank you, very valuable content. I would like to say to all our panelists a big thank you. And now I would like to invite our participants of the discussion to leave these chairs. And now we are inviting representatives of the ministry and of on ICAM, that's Jansa and Ines Silka. We met them at the beginning of our conference. Now we'd like to invite them to join us. Maybe they can reflect what we just talked about. There are some questions we have left for them, but maybe you have some questions particularly for our Next participants here in front, you can send in your questions now or keep silent ever afterwards. Of course not. We are looking forward to your questions. And before we look at those questions, maybe you have some comments you would like to reflect upon. Maybe you some thoughts you would like to share now. Then please.
I think the participants of the panel discussion have touched upon several relevant aspects. This pertains to institutional accreditation and its foundations. One of the important aspects suggested by Richards was the role of higher educational institutions and their responsibility related to post-studies period, the further education, requalifications. Speaking of institutional accreditation, accrediting institutions, all the actions which are related to the mission of the institution and the education, this whole dimension is noteworthy. Another aspect which has been sketched out is the fact that we have other assessments, such as the International Assessment of Scientific Institutions. There are also colleges which carry out vocational secondary education programs, and they have their own requirements. So it's something of a challenge and an opportunity to see that all of these processes are not overlapping, not reduplicating themselves, and so that the results are used for future assessments. And where it's possible, we can assess things in one go. So all of these things are important, in my opinion. Following the discussions that we have had, I would like to note that right now we don't talk about resources. We don't, because the task of the project was to create the institutional concept of accreditation. We have succeeded in that, and the next step, the next process will be to use this institutional concept and to develop an implementation plan. This would be an information report which the ministry will put forward through public discussions with all the interested parties, and there we'll have specific aspects to discuss about particular resources, time frame, planning, transition period, and so on and so forth. So it's clear why we don't have answers to all these questions. That's the next stage of our work. Thank you, Jolanta. Thank you. I am very glad that we have had the opportunity to hear the remarks from our panel members. This suggests that we are looking in the same direction and that we are thinking in the same direction. We are moving towards the same aim. We understand each other, we hear each other, we understand the pros and cons and how we should improve the quality assurance system. It's also important to remember some of the things that the discussion participants have noted. Quality culture and quality assurance is not a static process. It does not happen only when ICA calls you or when the experts come. It is something that is continuous, uninterrupted. It is happening all the time inside of the institution. Everyone is involved, everyone is cognizant of their role in the process. And I believe that institutional accreditation will further strengthen these aspects and will stimulate further development of quality culture. Thank you. Now let's have a look at the questions. We have had a question that I intentionally skipped because I think this is a question for you. Sandra Sprode asks us, educational institutions will have to begin accreditation in 2024 before receiving methodological suggestions. 2024 is the threshold year because we are running out of the cycle of previous accreditation. It's important to understand that we have a lot of assessments to perform. This means that there will be a transition schedule, the rhythm for these institutions to be assessed. These are the tasks for the next information report to suggest a solution. This means that it won't be something that is for all the institutions at once to do. It will be split in different stages to respect the capacity of the agency, which would have had to carry out several processes at once, and also to give the opportunity for the institutions to prepare for the changes and to make sure that they are facing this institutional accreditation in good shape, showing that they have implemented the changes and their performance is ready for external assessment. I would like to add that we will definitely organize seminars for colleges, and we will explain the process. We will explain the duties of the parties involved, the assessment criteria, to make sure that everyone who is involved can understand their responsibility. Another question. Previous participants have partially answered it, but maybe you have something to add. Anna Talitsa asked, how detailed should be the assessment of individual study directions? I think the external normative base suggests dropping study directions because so far they have been closely linked with the accreditation process, and seeing as the accreditation process now has a completely different focus, it's less significant. Of course, for internal organization of the work of higher education, this is a habit, this is convenient, they are used to having it this way, they can keep it for their internal needs. But as regards the study process, we have no intention of keeping the direction approach for further accreditation. Yes, in assessing the institution as a whole, we think that we are going to assess as individual study programs, like our Estonian colleagues have mentioned. When they assess institutions, they look at a few programs. What criteria should there be for selecting the programs? I cannot say. We will discuss it together. In our agency, we have had assumptions that these might be programs selected by our agency. Maybe the expert group will suggest something, maybe the institutions will suggest what programs they recommend for assessment. So we'll see how we'll move on with this. And I asked the previous panel, what is necessary to make these steps? Maybe you have something to add. Maybe you would like to invite the higher education institutions to prepare in a particular way. Of course, everyone wants more time, but from your standpoint, maybe you have some calls to make upon partner institutions. What should be done? What can you do among yourselves to make sure that the machine is already working, the wheels are rolling, and it's an active process? I think that for us, the most important thing is time. Enough time to make sure we can complete the existing processes and launch new processes and to prepare for them. Time is the most important factor. I think that maybe, well, I have lost my thought. I will continue if you have forgotten what you wanted to say. In the last 2 years, we have had very intensive sessions at the parliament. The legislature changes things in a very radical way in everything that is related to higher education. And I invite you to follow these changes, because this will be one of the aspects we'll take into account. The implementation of legislative reforms at the higher education institutions is going to be one of the key factors. We needn't expect new demands, but it's related to the current decisions. The changes in academic career framework, new doctoral studies concept. The legislature introduces new views on the role of science in higher education. All higher educations are considered as science institutions. Now we need to understand what this means, work with these matters in creating development strategies. This is going to be one of the foundational documents to work with in the process of accreditation. I invite you to follow the current changes to create a meaningful development strategy and to be ready for institutional accreditation. Jolanta, I would like to invite all the involved parties, higher educational institutions, to be actively involved in creating the process, in developing the model, because sometimes it's easy to criticize, but I think everyone should be involved. This is going to be a new model, a new approach for all of us. And the added value of this process is something that depends on all of us. So let's cooperate and work together. I see that there are no more questions. Dotson, maybe you have any last comments about the further steps, follow-up, and key factors? Yes, following from what Jolanta has said, cooperation is not just in the framework of this project, it's cooperation on the development of this project in the future. We will go to the government to discuss this in greater detail and to discuss the implementation mechanisms. We are planning to work on this report in the summer so that in autumn we can present it for public discussion. And as Jolanta suggests, we need constructive follow-up and suggestions how we can improve this report so that later we can go to the government and to come to agreement with the representatives of the industry, how we're going to ensure these processes in Latvian higher educational. And this is surely going to be followed by a vision about the necessary resources so that we can implement this reform to a great standard. Thank you. Thank you for your remarks and thank you for answering the questions. Thank you for commenting on the further steps. Right now, we are ready to thank all the viewers for participating in the final conference of the project, which has been implemented by our ministry and cooperation partners. Thank you for your participation, and I would like to wish you to make sure that the steps aimed at further strengthening the education system would benefit all of us. Thank you very much.